It was all Gosford Tanner's fault that I was estranged from my family. I wasn't happy about what happened, but you can get used to anything given time. Therefore, I would have endured my bachelor existence forever if the damned accident hadn't happened. In many ways, I was very lucky with the injuries. It could have been so much worse. I'm James Collins, by the way. My dad, also James, was always called Jim, so I was James at home and Jim at work, Jimmy even on occasion. Mandy Collins, my wife, sometimes used to call me Jimbo, but not recently, obviously. We split up after I caught her in bed with her lover. It happened at a party and with Gosford Tanner, of all people. Okay, I'm not that smart, but honestly, what idiot calls their precious boy-child Gosford? Don't they realize that when he's a grown man, people will not take him seriously? I certainly didn't at first. With hindsight, that was a serious misjudgment on my part. I was attending a fire at a rather rundown warehouse when the accident happened. The place was originally a Victorian mill, more recently used for temporary storage, and I guess the timbers couldn't have been in too good a condition. A couple of us doughty firefighters were teamed up on the first floor, covering each other while damping down after the main blaze had been extinguished, when we were caught out. Without warning, the floor gave way beneath us and we both fell about 25 to 30 feet or so. Brendan was fine, he fell on a stack of wooden pallets. I was less fortunate. I ended up on the concrete floor, breaking my left ankle initially. That would have been relatively okay, but then the beams from the floor above fell on top of me, which broke my right leg in 4 places plus a couple of ribs, further compounding my injuries by concussion and a dislocated and heavily bruised right shoulder. I also badly sprained and hairline fractured my right wrist. I was immediately knocked unconscious by another beam which hit my Metro thermoplastic helmet, shattering the face shield, so I honestly didn't feel a thing until I woke up in hospital about 2 or 3 days later. That helmet was a lifesaver. The guys from my watch at the fire station visited the first day I was awake, even though I was still almost completely out of it. My landlords Mr. and Mrs. Murray visited the following day once they were aware of where I was. They brought in with them a copy of the local midweek paper, which covered the fire, for me to read. It said a firefighter was hurt but didn't include my name in the report, although I was mentioned by name and a stop press stamped on the back page. The picture of the warehouse taken in daylight showed part of the roof collapsed, so I thought maybe some of that roof fell on me. I really couldn't remember what happened to me after the floor gave way, as I was completely out of it. The news from the doctors wasn't good. I was going to be in hospital for between 2 weeks and a month, then had to undergo extensive physiotherapy for several months, so I probably wouldn't be back to light duties at work for about 4 or 5 months. The worst case scenario was that I might not return to full duties for up to a 12-month. My main worry as I was lying there, though, was that I was due to send my monthly payment off to my ex-wife Mandy's account by the end of the week, and I wouldn't be able to do so. In fact, I would possibly miss next month's too, depending on how mobile I was by then. My bank card was at the station, my mobile phone was locked away with my wallet in my locker too. I would have to contact the station and give someone my lock combination so they could bring my gear up to me. I decided I would have to call Mandy and warn her that my payment would be late. This would be the first time we had spoken for about a month short of 5 years. I wasn't sure if I could even remember her, our old number, but I had nothing better to do than lie there thinking, so I ran the numbers through my head and wrote down what I thought it was. I didn't have any money on me for a phone card, so I waited until afternoon visiting time to ask Mrs. Murray to bring some cash from my bedside drawer in my room, next time she came. She immediately subbed me with a $5 from her purse, which would tide me over, and would replace it from any loose change in my room. I usually emptied my pockets regularly, so there should have been enough to more than cover her little loan. Mrs. Murray also brought a pleasant surprise, an old PDA phone that was no longer used as her husband had bought a new one. The battery life was poor and you couldn't call out on it due to the fault that made it redundant in the first place, but she brought along the mains plug and some earphones to play the music stored on it. I had become only barely computer literate by this time, as I had never owned one, although they had a couple of computers at the station that guys used and I had picked up some tips in using them. She kindly showed me how to access the tunes and games already stored on the device and demonstrated how I could download others and access the internet. Mrs. Murray set up an account for me to buy additional tunes and also helped me set up a free email account so I could keep in contact with the maze and the fire station. She made sure I carefully wrote down my passwords and kept them in my bedside cabinet. I used the PDA to send off an email to the station office to request they bring some stuff in from my locker for the next time somebody visited. I got a reply almost immediately confirming that one of the lads would visit tonight and bring my stuff. I wished then that I knew Mandy's email address. It would mean I wouldn't have to speak to her. When Mrs. Murray departed at the end of visiting time, I asked the nurse if I could use the telephone. They had a payphone which they could wheel to your bedside, but it only took phone cards, not cash. I was already aware of that, having asked about it previously. The nurse helpfully offered to send one of the more able-bodied patients to buy one with my £5. The kiosk in reception sold them by the handful. By the time I got the card and the phone, it was just gone 4 o'clock. I decided to ring my old home there and then and get it over with before the evening meals started coming round and the evening visiting period started. "Hi," the answering voice was that of a boy. "Josh? That you?" I asked, incredulous that it was my son Joshua answering the phone. I hadn't spoken to him for so long and didn't even know what he looked like anymore. He sounded so mature I almost lost it, emotionally, there and then. "Yeah," he said hesitatingly. "Who's this?" It's your, what do I say?" I couldn't say I was his dad. He already had a dad, that bloody Gosford bloody Tanner, so I lied. "It's your Uncle Jimmy, Josh." Hardly anyone called me Jimmy. Sally used to and the daft old cleaning lady down at the station did, confusing me with a nephew, I guess. "I don't have an uncle." "Jimmy," Josh said suspiciously. He wasn't stupid, not like his trusting, dumb old dad, anyway. "I'm your long-lost Uncle Jimmy," I said, pleased that Josh was bright. "Can you pass a message on to your mom, Josh?" I continued. "Okay. Tell her that Jimbo is in hospital and can't get down the bank for at least a month, maybe 2, I said. "Can you explain that I'm really sorry about that? Say that I don't have the use of my mobile phone, so she needs to tell me by email if she has any problems with the delay paying into the account. Can you take down this email address?" Smart boy Josh, of course he could take down the address, and he did. I asked about the girls. I didn't say my girls. I found out they were watching the telly in the lounge. I asked if his mom was okay and he said, without committing himself, that she would be home in an hour or so. I didn't ask about his dad and he didn't offer any info, so I let it ride. I noticed Josh said she rather than they, but I guess Mr. Gosford bloody Tanner was probably headmaster by now and was no doubt first in and last out at work each day. Actually, knowing the bastard as I did, I bet he'd be last in first out with all his bloody work delegated to his minions. We chatted on the phone for a little while. I found out Josh was a keen footballer and naturally supported my favorite team, too. Well, we were both from the same football-mad city, so it should have been expected. We both moaned about how rubbish they had been playing for 3 seasons now. He asked me what I did and without a thought told him I was a firefighter. Quick as a flash he asked if I had been hurt at a fire, otherwise why was I in hospital? He had his mother's brains all right, lucky little so-and-so. I told him yes, I had been injured. Josh then quizzed me whether I had been hurt in a rescue, but I told him no, the fire had been put out by then, everyone was safe and we were just damping down when the floor gave way under us and the roof caved in on top of us. He wanted to know all the injuries I had received. Boys can be ghoulish at times, I remembered from my own youth. So I told him that I would be unable to get back on my feet until my ankle, wrist, and shoulder mended, and I would be on crutches for a couple of months until my broken leg healed. Josh wanted to come visit and sign my cast, like he did with one of his classmates who fell out of a tree, but I told him it was much too far to come. He was also disappointed that he couldn't ride on the fire engine even if he did come up. I promised I would contact his local fire station and see if they would call into his school for a visit. They do that from time to time for PR and might do it for my boy, I could only ask. He wondered if I could visit him when I was better and wear my firefighting equipment. I told him we didn't take our uniform home, we kept it at the station. He was disappointed again but wished anyway that I got better soon. I felt empty after our call ended. I was so proud of the way he had spoken to me. He sounded like he had turned out a nice kid, even with his natural father out of the picture. I missed Josh, I realized. I missed all of them, much more than I thought I would. I still kept in touch with my mom while I was in Lincolnshire. She was in a nursing home by now and not doing so well, health-wise. With no home life of my own, I was able to cover all the overtime that was available at each of the companies I worked for, so I was also able to send a little money to Mom to help keep her going. My elder sisters helped her out too, but I had very little contact with them, just occasional cards and even rarer letters at Christmas. They had moved out when I was small. My birth was a late afterthought, when Mom thought she was too old to conceive again. Mom did mention the grandkids in her letters from time to time, but hardly ever referred to Mandy and never to Tanner. I don't think she saw them as much as she'd like without me being around. I know how she felt. I didn't have a social life as such. On my rest days I worked casually at a local garage fitting exhausts, a lot of it as cash in hand, and took my holidays in a number of different coastal resorts up and down the East Coast. I wasn't what you could call happy with my life, but I wasn't miserable either. Nor was I lonely. I had my mates. The camaraderie among firefighters is legendary. I did have a girlfriend, Sally, for a short while. She was a cute girl who worked in the office at the duct factory. We went out for nearly 18 months, but the relationship never went anywhere. We stayed on good terms for a few weeks, and I had bought a mobile phone that she used to send me messages on at first, but then dwindled until I hadn't got a reply for quite some time. Sally was a nice girl, but she hinted that she wanted to get married and settle down. I had been there, done that, and besides, I didn't even know if I was still married. I didn't bother with a divorce. I had left that up to Mandy and Tanner to deal with. My tea came and was cleared away. Then a couple of lads from the fire station came in to visit, bringing with them my mobile phone and wallet plus a bag of fruit contributed by the rest of my crew. We had the usual insulting exchange of banter that such tight-knit crews have for a couple of hours until visiting time ended. They had a play around with the PDA, too, both of them more experienced than Mrs. Murray apparently was. They got into the email account and added their addresses so I could keep them up to date with my condition. They pointed out that I had a message in the inbox, but I said I would look at it later once they had gone. Then the guys set me up with a Facebook account, as most of the guys on the station were on the network, which meant I could keep up with everyone's news. Privately, I thought I might search for Amanda Collins or even Amanda Tanner and see what she was up to, but then I decided the process would just be too painful. When my friends left, I idly tallied up what was left out of the bag of fruit they had brought. I found they had eaten all the grapes I had started with plus all the new ones they brought, which amused me no end, but at least they had left me a few apples to help keep the doctors at bay. Better than nothing, I thought. There was a bloody pineapple in the bag, too. A whole bloody pineapple. How did they expect me to cut up and eat that blooming thing with my arm in a sling? Some firefighters I thought are pretty dumb. Maybe that's why I was one of them. I had maybe half an hour before lights out, so I looked up my password again and checked my email inbox. My mate said there was a message. There were two, actually, both from Mandy.Collins306. Her birthday was June 30th, I remembered, not that I had felt like sending her a card for the last 4 or 5 years. The first message was just after 6 o'clock and said, "Jimbo, where the hell are you? How are you? Josh says you are in hospital and injured in a fire. When can we come and see you? We all love you and miss you so much. Love, Mandy XXX." The second message was longer and had only arrived in the last 20 minutes or so. "Jimbo, Josh searched for various combinations of Jim Collins firefighter Cleatharps and came up with your accident in the local paper plus a load of other stuff which really worries me no end. We earlier found on callback that the phone number you called us on is from Cleatharps, but it won't accept external calls. We are all looking forward to coming up to see you at the General Hospital on Saturday. Love, Mandy XXX." No. 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 That was the last thing I wanted. I quickly replied, well, as quickly as I can type left-handed with one finger on that tiny keyboard, telling Mandy that she wasn't to come up. I couldn't face them, couldn't face her especially, and I would try and get the money to them somehow. Anything to stop her coming. Whatever happened, I didn't want her to see her now or ever again. The reply came almost immediately. "I'll have my mother look after the kids on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and come up myself alone. What room or ward are you in?" No. I don't want her here, especially when I was so helpless and unable to get away from her. She needed to come up and grab her money, I thought, which is why she is so desperate to see me. No doubt about it. Probably wanted to force me to pay backdated alimony for her as well. That's at the bottom of it. Damn. I suppose Gosford Bloody Tanner wanted his bloody ounce of flesh, after all. I'm not that well paid, even doing 2 jobs. I could only afford to send enough money to them for the kids, not to keep Mandy in the luxury to which she probably expected to be kept. I replied to her email saying that it would be impossible for me to see her, not only because of the state of my health, but it would also cause considerable embarrassment to my present domestic situation. I expressly forbade Gosford Bloody Tanner to visit. He could look after their bloody kids. I couldn't take his gloating for all the bloody tea in China. I said I would make it clear to the hospital that I wouldn't see her under any circumstances, including my deathbed, so it would be a total waste of time her coming all this way for nothing. I hoped that this would lead her to think I had started another family and that any chance meeting between my previous wife and current partner would therefore be untenable. I also told her that the ward lights would be out in a matter of minutes and that I would be unable to communicate again until the morning. I switched off the PDA the moment after I sent the email and prayed that she would comply with my wishes, which I admitted to myself, on her bloody track record, would have to be a first. I slept pretty fitfully that night, not just because of the jumble of thoughts churning through my head. I wasn't comfortable lying down because of my shoulder. I couldn't sit up as my ribs hurt too much and my leg and ankle throbbed whatever position I tried. My leg was in traction, which limited any movement I could make anyway. I was already long fed up with bedpans, so I was hardly what you could call rested and collected when I booted up the PDA after my morning toilet and breakfast and checked out my email account. There was a message from Mandy, which I opened with a feeling of impending doom. I was right, she wasn't going to give up. Mandy never did. It was one of the traits that once endeared me to her when we were about 7 or 8. We had played together as babies, then were childhood sweethearts once upon a time before courting, engaging, and marrying each other. That was until she tired of me, obviously, inevitably. James, I don't care what cozy little domestic arrangements you happen to have, she had typed, I am only interested in my children and their happiness. I don't give a flying fig for you and your new family. How could you do that anyway? Our children want to see their father and I am not going to stop them, wherever you choose to hide your cowardly arse in order to escape your parental responsibilities. At the moment, Josh and the girls don't know that their new fireman hero Uncle Jimmy is also their really shitty dad who ran out on them when they needed him. Rest assured I will be bringing them up to see you in the next week or two, and I do not want you to make a hurtful scene when I do and upset them. To that end, I am coming up by train to see you this evening, hopefully before the end of your visiting hours. If you want to keep your old wife and children a sordid secret from your present comfortable pipe and slippers setup, you better make sure your new bastard family are out of my way so we can sit down as responsible parents and sort out exactly how I expect you to behave once your children get to visit their dad. Mandy didn't sign it, and no bloody kisses at the bottom now that the chips were clearly down on the table. Well, Amanda, I typed back with my one left finger, if I'm a really shitty dad then you're a totally slutty mom. Okay, I ran as far away from you as I was able. I couldn't possibly compete with the fancy man, or was it men? You were banging when I was out of the way working all the bloody hours I could, earning a living wage for us. What do your kids think about Uncle Bloody Gosford then? Do they think more of him than their stupid dad, or is Gosford their dad now? Is he their current hero who came in to save the day once you kicked their inadequate old man into touch once you had had your fill of me? I bet you poison my name and praise your current squeeze every bloody chance you can. Get it through your cheating skull that I still hate you and I don't want to see you tonight, next week, when we are old and gray, or ever again. I shake with anger when I think of you humiliating me in front of all your fancy fart-arse Friday. Ends at that teacher's party. You'd made it pretty clear for years that I wasn't anywhere near good enough for you and your stuck-up mother and had been laughing behind my back at me for a long while. When I thought about it after I left, I realized you had been disrespecting me right in front of my face for years. You and your mother were gradually undermining me and my insignificant part in our supposed relationship. I worked hard for us, getting my hands rough and grimy 6 full exhausting days a week. While I was wearing myself out, your lover boy was swanning around in a suit using his energy to keep my wife entertained while I was tying myself in knots for my family, putting food on the table. Since I left, I've tried to send my kids every single penny I can spare and have managed to do so with just a single hiccup when I was forced to transfer from weekly to monthly pay. That's why I rang Josh and left you a message yesterday, because I was concerned that you'd miss the money due tomorrow and worry about when or whether it was ever coming again. I only woke up in hospital 2 days ago and have absolutely no means of transferring any cash to you in time. Also, I don't even have a checkbook with me, so you coming up for your money is a complete waste of time for both of us. I am still so angry with you that I am sending the vital signs monitors off the bloody charts, setting the alarms off, and I'm going to have the nurses back giving me gyp in a minute. I thought after all this time I was over what you did to me, but I know now that I will never get over it. I can never ever forget what you did, but what I can do is forgive you, if that is what you are chasing me for. If you just want closure of our marriage, I give it to you freely here and now. Send me the divorce papers and I'll sign them in an instant. I just want to get on with my life and you can get on with yours. We don't even have to ever see each other again. As for the kids? As I was so beneath your contempt and no longer of any use to you, I thought they'd do better with a stable relationship between you and your current lover and enjoy a convenient middle-class upbringing. I assumed they were young enough to have forgotten all about me by now. They never saw me much anyway. I was always out slave laboring most of the time they were up and about, so I don't suppose they even noticed when I was no longer around. So leave me alone, please, Amanda. I am too sore to type anymore. Have a really good life, I mean it. This is goodbye, regards Jay. I sent it, logged off my email account and switched the blasted thing off. I didn't hear back from her until checking my emails again at lunchtime. My morning was routine, filled with breakfast, followed by the frustrating bedpans, bed bath, pain-killing tablets, doctor's visit, mid-morning tea and biscuits, changes of bandages on my head and lesions on my face, and particularly painful where my broken ribs had punctured my skin. Your life is not your own when you are in hospital, but then I couldn't remember when my life was my own prior to 5 years ago. Since then you could say I had pleased myself, but I wasn't truly pleased with what I had. The message from my ex-wife was short and sharp and without comment, see you tonight. Again, no trace of signature or kisses. A pattern was certainly emerging here and I really wasn't looking forward to seeing her. I thought about asking the nurse for a sleeping tablet with immediate effect, but there was no avoiding the inevitable. Nobody came to see me Friday afternoon visiting time. The side ward I was in had 6 beds, 3 had broken limbs and 1 was an old boy who was completely out of it most of the time, so I was unable to communicate with him, and the final bed was empty until late afternoon when a guy who had just been operated on and barely conscious was wheeled in and the curtains pulled around him. The previous occupant of that bed left I think the day I woke up, but I was pretty hazy then, and for part of the time that I was barely conscious the screens were up around my bed anyway. I was furthest away from the windows and the delight of fresh air. I was used to exercising and working outside. I trained, kept fit, played a lot of sports and worked in the open air most of the time. I was hot and sweaty even though I had a bed bath early in the morning. I felt that I stank to high heaven already, particularly under my casts, and it was still 6 or 7 hours before Mandy was due to put in an appearance and ruin the rest of my day. It occurred to me that once I got fit again I could move towns once more, perhaps move further north. But I loved firefighting and knew if I transferred anywhere to another station she could find me again. Several people occupying my ward had visitors in the afternoon. One had a couple of little girls skipping about the bed and generally fidgeting with boredom and continually being shushed by the adults with them. I couldn't help wondering about my own 2 girls. When I left home, Kelly and Katie were 3 and 5, now they would be pushing 8 and 10. Perhaps Mandy would bring some photos. Damn! I thought, I'm falling into that trap of caring about them that I'd deliberately been avoiding all these years. At the evening visiting hours, Mrs. Murray popped in to see me again with baby Darren. Well, I say baby, he was about 2 years old. She brought up a change of pajamas for me and took the soiled ones away in a carrier bag for washing. I had been wearing one of those uncomfortable hospital smocks since my morning bath. I had got on quite well with little Darren and I used to delight in tossing him about when I was at home. He couldn't understand why he wasn't allowed to climb all over me like he was used to. Mrs. Murray was very chatty, but nervous. That was unusual as she was usually very confident and determined for a young woman. Eventually, after I prompted her, she admitted that she had just learned, well, actually confirmed by the doctor a week or so ago, that she was pregnant, 2 months gone. That meant that I needed to move soon. She hated bringing it up just as I was injured and needed time to recover. The Mays were planning to move Darren into my room and turn Darren's old box bedroom back into a nursery to await the new arrival. They wanted all the redecoration finished a month before the birth so the paint smell would be gone by the time it was needed, and required a month or so of weekends to get my old room ready for Darren. It looked like I had 5 months of lodgings available at the most. The thought of the upheaval involved rather depressed me. Perhaps that was another means of telling me that I needed to move on, with my life in general as well as geographical. Some of my firefighter pals turned up too. I could hear them gather in the corridor where they waited somewhat noisily. Ward rules were that only 2 people were allowed at each bedside at a time. When Mrs. Murray and Darren got up to go, Darren insisted on giving me a proper kiss, so Mrs. Murray decided to give me a quick peck too. That was a first. I didn't even know her Christian name. She and her husband were very formal and always called me Mr. Collins. Only little Darren called me Jim, and that was only after my insistence when I first encountered the little tyke. 4 of my fireman pals came in, big boisterous chaps all wearing sweatshirts with Lincolnshire Fire Service or the Humberside equivalent. Some of the guys had worked for either neighboring services over the years. I think the nurses made an exception to the 2-to-a-bed rule when they came in, although they definitely didn't relax the rule when my garage mates had earlier visited en masse. They cheered me up immediately and made the last hour or so of visiting time fly by, and I clean forgot all about Mandy's impending arrival. The nurse came round with 10 minutes visiting time left, warning visitors to wind down, please. When she got to my bed, the nurse advised that I had another visitor waiting, so could the guys please leave within a couple of minutes to give her a chance to visit? That's the babe what was waiting when we got here, said Andy. How come a beauty like that knows a scrawny ugly old bugger like you? Of course, I had finished my brief relationship with my girlfriend Sally a couple of months before I became a firefighter, so the guys had never seen me with or even heard me talking about a woman, other than Mrs. Murray, and they had pulled my leg about her as soon as they walked in. Mrs. Murray was a very attractive but much younger brunette, probably about Sally's age, early to mid-20s. She's my ex, I explained wearily, referring to the waiting Mandy. The painkillers must have suddenly worn off then because all those old agonies came flooding back. I guess I must have winced in pain. She a free agent now then, eh? Nobby was always getting into trouble over women. His reputation for shagging anything in skirts was legendary in our station. No, I groaned, she replaced me with Gosford Bloody Tanner. What? Laughed Andy. He got a bigger dick than you or what? Yeah. Bugger. I didn't mean to say that out loud. Of course, Gosford Bloody Tanner had a bigger dick than me. There are a number of images permanently burned into my brain from that fateful night of the barbecue party, about a month short of 5 years ago. I had to work that day. I worked every Saturday, and Mandy went to the party with friends in the afternoon before I joined them early evening. I remember the 30 long agonizing seconds I froze in the bedroom doorway while my wife and Tanner were obliviously enjoying extramarital relations with each other before I threw off my shock, stepped into the bedroom and punched the bastard as hard as I could in the side of his head. Neither of them knew I was even in the room until then. I remember the image of him sliding off to the left out of the bed in OU.T of my wife, and, yes, I do remember he was bigger. I don't know, maybe a couple of inches or so. I'm average. All the guys down the station shower together and we're all about average except for Nobby, and his first name is definitely not short for Norman. The only consolation I allowed myself was that Tanner's knob looked thinner, but that might have been an optical illusion due to his longer length. Sorry, mate, my friends chorused, looking at each other as they gathered their coats and shook my healthy left hand or slapped my good shoulder farewell. Mandy breezed into the ward as the guys began to file out, carrying a shoulder bag and a small overnight bag. I could see them all giving her the once-over as she swept by them. Well, I had to admit, Mandy always was worth a second look. I suppose this is the point at which I need to describe Mandy. I've always loved her and, I guess, to some small degree I always will. I'd known her for over 30 years to this point, as our near-neighbor parents were well acquainted. Mandy is quite petite, barely 5 feet tall and quite slightly built. Her breasts are tiny 32A but absolutely in proportion to her size. In fact, they are perfect, with sensitive and responsive nipples. She has always had long fair to dark blonde hair, mostly all the way down to her bum, which she wore in a ponytail or plaited pigtails when working at school, piled high on her head on evenings out, or loose and flowing at home and in bed. Her eyes are a startlingly bright blue, her face elfin, delicate with the most beautiful of smiles. Mandy has always had the ability to turn heads, but she never seemed to realize quite how stunning she actually was. If she had been aware of the effect she had on men, she would never have settled for me in the first place. She thought all men naturally hit on all women regardless of their looks. Today Mandy looked as beautiful as ever. Clearly she had traveled up straight from school, as she was wearing a smart skirt and blouse. Her hair was a lighter blonde than I remembered it and weaved into a pair of plaits over her shoulders and reaching her chest, so had been cut a foot or more shorter than it had been when I last saw her 5 years earlier. I suppose at 32 it was appropriate to wear her hair shorter. She flashed her brilliant smile at the guys in thanks for letting her visit as they filed past, who all turned to look at her, so that the lead man, Jack, an older guy with grown-up kids and should have known better, missed the doorway completely and crashed his shoulder into the door jamb, stopping suddenly, so the other guys all collided into him. It looked like a scene from Keystone Cops, but Mandy had turned her attention towards me by then and was completely oblivious to the effect she had caused. Her smile vanished immediately after she passed the boys and her face became grimly set, focused on me like a lioness eyeing up a wounded wildebeest. No sympathy registered, just the simple prospect of an easy meal for her and the cubs. Her smile, that had been effortlessly radiated to my departing pals, vanished like the early morning summer mist, boiled away in an instant under a merciless sun. Clearly the effect I had on her had little in common with attraction and even less with affection. Perhaps she was hoping that I was so badly injured that she could kill two birds with one trip and stay on for the funeral, in which case I'd be delighted to disappoint her. She kissed me almost perfunctorily on my sore bruised forehead before sitting down. I noticed that her eyes focused steelily on my freshly laundered and folded change of pajamas left by Mrs. Murray on my bed. "How are you feeling?" Mandy asked frostily, arching her eyebrows, adding, "You look a real mess." "Feeling fine," I lied. "Actually I ached all over and not just physically." "You look good. I like your hair shorter, it looks more sophisticated." I was trying to play nice, like my mom always told me to in polite society, even if Mandy wasn't as polite as she could have been considering the circumstances. Mandy flashed her smile again, for the first time at me in half a decade. "Thank you. The children all send their love." "They know I'm in hospital then?" "Not as such. They think Uncle Jimmy, the hero fireman, is in hospital. I've only told them that I'm away visiting him. They don't know yet that I'm here to see if their father can be persuaded to live up to his responsibilities by getting back into their lives. They need to see you again and regularly, James, if only to reassure them that your sudden departure wasn't their fault." She was still smiling slightly as she regarded me. "Well, we know whose fault it was, even if they don't," I said quietly, resignedly, recognizing she called me James. "Only my mother and sisters call me James. She used to call me Jimbo all the time as a mark of affection, but that was a long time ago, before Tanner came on the scene." Her smile disappeared again at that and she looked frosty once more. "Our children know it was my fault why we split up, although it didn't help any that you wrote all four of us off without giving any one of us a second chance. I never lied to them about whose fault it was, although I didn't go into details back then. Josh is old enough to know the real reason and he has accepted what happened and has forgiven me for my part in our split. The girls are too young at the moment to have the details explained to them, but when I feel they up to it I will inform them, too." I nodded. She continued, with increasing anger in her voice. "They accept that our split was my fault and why you don't want to see me or speak to me. What they do not understand, what they cannot even begin to understand, is why you abandoned them and have never tried to get back into their lives. I cannot understand that either. They are your children and dash." "Are they?" I interjected. "Are they mine?" Her face looked shocked, her mouth forming a perfect O, her eyes wide open, her tiny fists clenched with white knuckles. I had the feeling that if I hadn't got my right leg in plaster and in traction, my left foot and ankle plastered up, as was my right wrist, with my right arm in a sling and a big bandage on my head covering half of my forehead, I swear she would have given me a severe beating. "How can you think that?" "Of course, dash." "Because you are a cheating bitch," I interrupted again with a snarl, "so how can I believe anything you say? For all I know you've been whoring yourself out for years." She spluttered, eyes welling up in tears. "Bastard. It was just the once, just the once." She got up and rushed out of the room. I sat there feeling like a complete heel. On the one hand, I had wanted to get rid of her, but I wasn't happy about how it happened. The ceiling lights were dimmed shortly after that, but I didn't sleep much all night. Hospitals are never quiet places and rarely restful. I ached all over and couldn't get comfortable in the limited sleeping positions available to me. I was miserable. At several points during the night, I considered asking the nurses for more painkillers, but decided I was only feeling so sore because I was so low emotionally. Besides, firefighters are supposed to be tough, and I didn't want the nurses to see that I had been crying. My scheduled painkillers were delivered to me just before breakfast. I hoped I would be left alone until visiting times to catch up on my rest. I was surprised when Mandy came into the ward just as the breakfast tray was being cleared away about 9:30. She waltzed in like she belonged in the place and put her shoulder bag down by my bed. She had changed from her business attire into much more relaxed and comfortable jeans, t-shirt, and trainers. She looked fit and well, beautiful of course, and, very surprisingly, was smiling broadly. Quite a contrast to our most recent parting. "Hi, honey," she said cheerfully, "you look like shit again this morning." "How do you feel, though?" "Don't call me honey," I growled. I was sure the painkillers should have kicked in by now, but some pains that we feel acutely are impervious to prescription drugs. "What are you doing here anyway? Visiting time's not for hours yet." "Ah," she replied triumphantly, "this is where getting here early last night and speaking to the night sister came in very handy." Mandy looked annoyingly smug. I had that sinking feeling come over me. I'd experienced that before. "And," she continued, "I have had an extremely enlightening conversation with the day sister, too, honey." She smiled like the cat that swallowed the canary in a huge dollop of cream while eyeing up the goldfish for second helpings, and then, which was unthinkable, she leaned across me and kissed me on the forehead before I could move out of the way. Mind you, I was limited in my movement and had nowhere to evade her. I noticed, too, that unlike the perfunctory kiss yesterday, she actually lingered as if the kiss meant something to her. Boy, was I worried now. I'm a guy who relies heavily on stability and knowing where I stood. Uncertainty makes me queasy, and I was feeling sick enough without this unforeseen development on top. "So," I said, "please tell me you are only popping in to wish me a final fond farewell. If that is the case, goodbye and see you next in hell, honey." "No, sugar, I'm here to take care of you for a couple of days," she smiled sweetly. "Then, hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, if not sooner, I am taking you back home with me and help you with your recovery program." "Oh, no. No, you're not, over my dead body." I spluttered. "Besides, I live up here in Cleethorpes, I work here, my whole life is here. I'm not going anywhere." "Oh, you can come back to live up here if you must, in 4 or 5 months or so at the earliest, possibly up to a year, according to your doctor, before you are fit to return to work as a fireman again. But in the meantime you are going to be signed over to your next of kin to look after you. And you know who your next of kin is, don't you, honey?" "No," I cried, "there is no way that's going to happen. I am going home, to my place up here." "But," she smiled that sweet but infuriatingly knowing little smile of hers, "you don't have a home here anymore and you haven't got anywhere else to go." "But dash." "Hush, Jimbo, you'll break blood vessels if you are not careful, and that will only delay your recovery and you'd have to stay at home with me even longer," she said calmly, her voice smooth as silk and dripping with honey. "I saw Annabelle and Darren visiting you last night, and I must confess that at the time I thought they were your supposed new family. I was upset seeing you kiss the kid and then your cheap floozy. That was why I was just a little bit pissed at you last night. But we have cleared up that little misunderstanding in timely fashion first thing this morning. A very childish little trick on your part, one might say, sweetheart." "Oh," I thought. There was a glint of triumph in her eye, and I remembered well that glint from when we were kids. I never, ever had the upper hand in our relationship. Not once. Mandy manipulated me from day one and my life was never my own. I was in trouble, deep shit, and there was nothing I could do about it. Mandy always could twist me around her little finger. She was very good at it. She'd been practicing on me since, well, before we were even teenagers. "But," she continued, triumphantly, "I spoke with the day nurse, nice lady that Brenda, first thing this morning, and she told me all about your living arrangements. So I got Annabelle's number from your admission form and called her. Mandy paused for effect, willing me to engage with her. And? I asked, having inevitably accepted my cue as the stupid straight man. She obviously had all the best lines. Who writes crap like this anyway? Well, I knew I was beaten and back reeling on the ropes. I could have taken a mandatory count, but she had paused waiting for a response and I simply didn't have a clever one to hand. I knew she'd be up early in the morning with a lively 2-year-old at home. So I rang her first thing. Annabelle told me all about her hubby Gordon and their upcoming happy event and how delighted she would be if you vacated the room at your earliest convenience so they could get the bedroom refitted ready for the new arrival. There's no time like the present, so I'm going round this afternoon to pack your stuff in your car and take it home with me. What? You can't take my stuff or my car. I protested. Yes, I can. What's yours is mine, remember, husband. I have spoken to your station chief. Again, his mobile number was on your admission form as your work contact, and he is bringing down your car during visiting hours today and will hand over the keys to me. I suppose you're happy now, aren't you? I snapped, rubbing it in that what's mine is yours and what's yours is anyone's except mine. That's such a nasty thing to say to me, she sniffed. It's a nasty thing you did to me. She sat on the chair beside my bed and looked at me sadly for a full minute. You are right, it was a nasty thing I did to you and I have carried it around with me like a deadweight around my neck for 5 years. Believe me, I will have to live with it for the rest of my life. I know it was my fault that I have destroyed our marriage. I realize that your parents also split when you were still a child and you had to grow up without a father. I just don't want our children to suffer like you did any longer. I need you to be the dad you should be, otherwise you will be just as big an arse as that arsehole that ruined our marriage. Sounds like you're ready to kick that other arsehole out, I observed. That arsehole was never in the first place. Didn't you listen to a single word I said yesterday? She spat. I warned you a couple of months before when Gosford Tanner was flirting with you at that evening meal we went on with your department and you were flirting back at him just as badly, just as embarrassing to me. He was my boss, he was being friendly and he never took it too far. So while he was banging you in that bedroom you didn't think that he was taking things a little too far then, huh? I was drunk and drugged and I thought he was you. It was still bloody daylight out. I had my eyes closed. I had nothing more I could contribute. She went quiet for a while, too. I made one mistake only, which was completely unintentional and I've been paying the price for it ever since. Our kids are paying for it. And you are too. Let's make this clear, I was not seduced by Gosford Tanner, I was not a willingly participant, I was duped. I was effectively raped. Now I know that I will never be happy again for as long as I live. Just don't destroy your children's happiness as well as mine because of something I did, just so that you can use them to punish me. I'm pleading with you here, James, please love your children as they deserve and have them back in your life even if it is just seeing them a couple of times a week. If you come back with me to recuperate you could live with them again and see them every day for a while and rebuild a relationship with your children. 5 years without a father is too long for any child. I miss the kids like mad, I admitted, I think about them every day, I see so many things that remind me of them, especially lately, it drives me crazy. See, come home just for your recovery and recuperation and get to know them again. Then take it from there. Dash. We are not sleeping to dash. No, she snapped, of course. Absolutely not. We will definitely not be sleeping together. Besides, you will have to stay downstairs for the first few weeks anyway until you are mobile again, so we will put you in the dining room. We mostly eat in the kitchen anyway and we never entertain. I still don't want to go back, even having you here around me for just a few minutes brings back memories that I hoped I had forgotten. I couldn't sleep last night thinking about you and Gosford Tanner. It's about time you man up and faced what happened to us and get used to it, she put on her full school mom demeanor, and take on your responsibilities for once instead of running away and playing silly bloody fireman. Honestly, men. A nurse came to the entrance of the ward and smiled at us, catching Mandy's attention. Oh, goody, Mandy said with a huge grin on her face, getting up and walking through the doorway after the departing nurse, saying over her shoulder, it's almost bedbath time, we're both going to have lots of fun with this, honey. Oh, no. I groaned. It was 5 minutes later that Mandy returned with all the accoutrements she needed and proceeded to remove my hospital smock under the watchful eye of the impressively built nurse Wilma. I wasn't able to wear the pajama bottoms because of the leg cast, so I was necessarily naked under the smock. She carefully removed the dressing on my head, then Wilma leaned over to check the deep cut on my forehead. This had been caused when my face guard was smashed by a wooden beam and the jagged edge of the guard cut me along the forehead close to the hairline. It had a number of stitches to keep it knitted together, while a few other smaller scratches had butterfly tapes to minimize scarring while they healed. My forehead wound was examined and Wilma said the dressing could be left off for now to let the air get at it. Mandy washed my hair, which was cut very short, so it wasn't too big a job and easy to hand dry with a towel. Actually, Mandy was a lot gentler than the nurses had been the last bed bath I had a day earlier. Then she removed my sling and smock, revealing the colorful bruises on my right shoulder, back and sprained right wrist. Every time I winced, both Mandy and Wilma clucked their irritation at my male wimpishness. I couldn't help it, I hurt all over, and that was before they had even started. Mandy did gasp with a sharp intake of breath though, when the dressings on my broken ribs were removed. A beam had fallen on my torso, breaking 2 ribs and bruising a couple more. The ends of the fractured ribs had punctured through muscle and skin, leaving a couple of nasty open weeping wounds. I was lucky my lung hadn't been punctured in the process or my vital organs damaged. My torso was covered in an amazing array of colorful bruises. Mandy silently cried huge tears as she and Wilma cleaned up my wounds, washed and dried me, and Wilma put fresh dressings on and bound the bandages round my middle, almost too tight for me to breathe comfortably. Mandy put my fresh pajama top on me and replaced my sling to support my shoulder and plastered wrist. Then they proceeded to sponge wash the bottom half of my body, or at least the parts not covered by plaster. I had been a little uncomfortable having my bum and privates washed by the nurses the last couple of days, but that was nothing to how I felt when Mandy had a go. On the previous couple of bed baths I tried to think as negatively as possible, but was still cursed with involuntary erections ranging anywhere from lazy lob through to full iron hardness. With Mandy though, I was so unnerved that I swear I shrank like an undernourished worm frazzled on hot road tar at noontime in August. Wilma commented, "Not as per KY this marnine as usual, Mr. Collins, is we?" She chuckled, her multiple chins wobbling. She was a big black nurse with a thick African accent. "I'm a little intimidated today, Wilma. I can't compete with Gosford Bloody Tanner," I snarled. "I didn't realize he made you feel so inadequate," Mandy snapped equally venomously back. "I didn't actually notice at the time, but he obviously made a big impression on you." "So, honey, Gosford was how much bigger than you?" "A couple of inches or so," I answered Rosalie, "from what I saw and heard though, you seem to be more than appreciative of the difference." She didn't answer, and that had to be a first. I looked up at Mandy. She had turned quite pale and I could see more tears rolling down her cheeks. Wilma looked in turn at both of us and shook her head sadly. "I dunno what's going on between you two, but from what I seen these last couple of days, neither o' you got no problem in dat area," pointing theatrically downwards. Then she told me off, "As fair you, young man, remember 'bout a bird in de hand. You wife's here now, so get you head out of you bum and live wid it." "Yes, Jimbo," Mandy added through clenched teeth, "I am here now and I'm looking after you, whether you like it or not." Not much I could say to either statement. If the truth was known, I was more than a little ashamed of what I said about Gosford Tanner's tackle. I seemed to be obsessed with him as a rival, and I couldn't shake off my fixation even though Mandy had repeatedly said he was a one-off, a one-night stand, and not still anywhere in the picture. Why didn't I believe her? When they were finished bathing and drying me, I was completely exhausted and in a considerable degree of pain. I tried relaxing back on my mound of pillows as Wilma removed the washing bowl and towels while Mandy swept back the curtains before sitting on the chair next to my bed. You could have cut the tension between us with a knife. I was absolutely knackered and in agony. This was not helping me recover one little bit. "I'm sorry," I said, "that was a cheap shot, man. I know it's been years, but I am still angry and upset about what happened. I am sorry too, that it ever happened in the first place. Look, I'm not asking you to forget it entirely. I hardly remember any of it, to be honest, but I'll never forget the aftermath and why you left me. On the one hand, I wish you had stayed to help me cope with it, but you clearly didn't care enough for me to do that dash." I tried to interrupt but couldn't voice the thoughts running through my head. Mandy continued, "You do, on the other hand, need to accept that what happened was neither your fault or mine, and please try not to hate me for it. We still need to be able to communicate civilly between us, if only for the sake of our children." I know I said it in that angry email, but I really don't hate you, I whispered. It would be so much easier for me to accept what happened if I could. We never had a chance to talk about it at the time or since, Mandy said gently. Perhaps if I told you my side of the story it might make it easier for you to cope with? You've got me as a captive audience, I muttered, especially as you now seem to have the staff, my landlady, and my bloody station officer all on your side. I'm completely outnumbered here without a single bloody friend in the world. Chapter 2: Help. I didn't realize it at the time, but Tanner was after someone to have an affair with from virtually the first day that he joined the school as my department head, Mandy began, when I restarted part-time after 8 years out having the children, so eager to please and having adults around me after so long without. I seem to have been his main objective. I suppose he saw me as a vulnerable target. He was very subtle about it, taking time to discuss issues with me as my manager, giving me credit for all my suggestions and meetings, praising me for my work, congratulating me on the results the children were getting. He made me feel grown up and important after 8 years of basic childminding. I was eager to please. He was grooming you, I said. Yes, I know now that he was, she admitted. He used to touch me on the arm or shoulder, not aggressively or in a way that would alarm me, but innocently. I just thought he was a friendly, touchy-feely person. He was a very friendly and supportive boss. I guess I trusted him. So how did he get you into bed? I was on my own all afternoon at that barbecue party, waiting for you to arrive from work, and Gosford kept me company, listening to me and Dash. Listening to you moaning about me, and making disparaging remarks, I expect. No, quite the opposite. He was telling me how you would be here soon and I could look forward to cuddling up to you and show you how much I loved you, and I lapped it all up, she said. He was topping up my drinks and he definitely put something at them, making me horny and couldn't wait to get my hands on you as soon as you got there. He was setting me up for later, I know that now. You know I always worked every Saturday, I said quietly. It was one of our busiest days at work. I know, she responded. I had no problem with that, although I was upset earlier in the day that you couldn't have got at least a half day off, and was looking forward to you eventually getting there. If he had tried to put you down I would have sussed him out, but he kept saying how great I'd feel when my husband got there and could welcome you in my arms. In the meanwhile I thought I was having fun talking with someone I trusted, respected, and considered a friend. She stopped and thought for a while. I kept quiet. I had said enough on the subject and I guess I had accepted that she should have her say. We should have had this out nearly 5 years ago. I might have healed by now instead of sitting here poking at open festering wounds with a sharp stick. He was not a friend, he was a parasite, she said bitterly, and I was a victim. He had done the same thing at his previous school and I made sure my school were aware of it and didn't hide it under a table. I was put under a lot of pressure to resign, but I stuck to my guns and 1 or 2 people at the party saw I wasn't backing down and supported me with corroborating evidence. Tanner was eventually forced to resign, either that or face prosecution. Too little too late for us, of course. I always assumed he was doing the charming, that it would be one way. I just never thought you would give in so easy though. I had warned you what he was doing and I trusted you to resist. You knew I was coming as soon as I left work and got washed up and changed. Of course I did, and I was looking forward to dancing with you and making a night of it for just ourselves, with the children staying overnight with Mum. So what happened, exactly? We were talking, eating and drinking. We even have a few dances and were having an enjoyable time. Not just him and me, we were circulating with lots of our friends from school. He must have been spiking my drinks. There was a lot of coming and going late afternoon and early evening as the guys that brought children for the afternoon were taking them home and coming back again for the evening party. I think I got confused at what was going on. We sat there quietly for what seemed an age, giving me time to rake over the past again in my head. I worked in a tire and exhaust center back then, so Saturday was an intensive full day's work for me. My weekend was split, always Sunday off plus, on a rolling rota, Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday. Even then, I tended to work overtime 3 out of 4 of my midweek rest days because, quite frankly, once the kids came along, we barely managed to keep our heads above water on my basic pay and Mandy's part-time work, and she got precious little of that until the youngest started nursery school a year or 2 earlier. She had earned double what I earned when we got married, so stopping work to have our family really hit us hard in the pocket. Anyway, the occasion for this party was that the teachers at Mandy's school were having a summer barbecue. Naturally, for them, they held it on a Saturday, the first weekend of the summer holidays, at the head of mathematics' rather grand and rambling mock Tudor mansion. With my kids aged 7, 5, and 3, at that time, Mandy was about to increase her days at school that following September from 2 per week to 3, with a view to returning full-time once Kate I started primary school in a couple of years. So she thought it was important for her to be at this party. I couldn't get any more vacation time off because we were committed to a family fortnight holiday in August and I had used up all my holiday entitlement until October. Mandy was pissed at me accordingly, especially as I had taken up my last remaining holiday for a day's sea fishing with a bunch of mates during the previous month. Her new departmental head, Gosford Tanner, was one of those smartly dressed smooth types. The type I hate most, and I thought he'd been sniffing round Mandy for a couple of terms, since they started working at the school within a term of each other. Mandy had laughed at my suggestion that he was bidding to bed her. She insisted that she thought he was gay. He was single, he didn't date, didn't really hit on her or anyone, was just friendly, just like one of the girls. I wasn't so sure about that. My radar didn't pick him up as gay at all. I knew for certain though that I didn't like or trust Gosford Tanner. It was at that party that he achieved his aim and won my wife away from me. I caught them having what looked to me like consensual sex in one of the bedrooms almost as soon as I got there and had looked around for her. All her colleagues seemed to know what was going on, as they all unhelpfully turned their backs on me as I looked all over, before trying the bedrooms as a last resort. Mandy had been my childhood sweetheart, living just round the corner from me when we were kids. Our mothers were particularly good friends. My parents split up and my dad left home when I was about 10, so I became the man of the house at an early age and left school as soon as I could in order to bring some income into the home. Mandy, Amanda Wilson as she was then, went to college and on to university and became a secondary school teacher, specializing in English Lit and drama, as well as providing special needs support for the younger children coming up from primary and junior schools with reading difficulties. I was waiting for you to come to the party, Mandy said, bringing me back to the present day, lying there inactive, sore, and powerless in my hospital bed. This time I couldn't run, or lash out, or do anything except seethe, submerged deep in my own misery. What were you thinking, then, when he took you to that bedroom? I had to ask. We were just walking around exploring that huge place like everyone else had at some time during the afternoon, and I got to thinking I had to get myself ready for you. A sob escaped her as she continued. I was expecting you to arrive early evening, while it was still light, and Tanner said it was time to get ready to meet you in bed. He had been going on about it as if it was a secret plan by us for me to seduce you and that he was just helping me as a very good friend. Our children were away with my parents, we were at a party and I was looking forward to seeing you and holding you and loving you. I've loved you since I was a little girl, I've always loved you, my childhood sweetheart. And then I lay down on the bed and thought we were cuddling and kissing and making love. I thought it was beautiful and dreamy and just so right. I thought I was lost in your arms. Mandy looked at me for comment, but I didn't have anything to say. She continued. Then the next minute you were pulling me half undressed through the house party and driving me home, and I really didn't know for certain what was happening. I fell asleep at home in our bedroom until I woke up alone and looked around for you. I searched the house and found your sports bag and some clothes and all your underwear missing, and that you'd clearly moved out. I couldn't cope with what happened, I said miserably. You were my whole life at the beginning, but we had been drifting apart for years. You kept on sniping at me, belittling my job and the amount of income one should have been able to earn. I was never quite good enough for you or your mother. Then I finally lost you, and it suddenly dawned on me that, in losing you, I had lost myself. You never lost me, I was just misplaced, and only for just a few minutes, she sniffed. I didn't ever think you had the impression that we were drifting apart. I thought we were settling comfortably onto family life. Every couple moan about money when there's not a lot of it about. I didn't think we were any different to anyone else. I certainly wasn't looking to end our marriage. When the children came along, I was second, then third, finally fourth in the loving queue. We hardly ever made love the last couple of years, especially after you restarted work. I had to virtually beg for some affection. When we did go to bed together, I felt you were just going through the motions, as if I didn't do it for you anymore and I was more trouble than I was worth. I reckon with Kelly and Kate I must ring the conception bell about once in 5. She pulled some tissues out of her bag and sat quietly dabbing her eyes. I lay back quietly too, remembering the past. That's all I could do now, and even that took its toll on me. I recalled virtually dragging Mandy home from that party. All her work colleagues and their spouses were looking on at the pair of us, all of them knowing what had happened, no doubt discussing us between them. Perhaps some of them were feeling sorry for us, but they hardly even knew me from Adam. Mandy had been ashamed of me and kept me hidden from her school friends most of the time, particularly while we were having the children. Mandy was full of apologies in the car, crying fit to further splinter my already broken heart, saying it was the drink and I had been ignoring her all day. I was at work all day, you silly bitch, was all I could scream at her, I remembered while I drove home in the gathering gloom. I kept telling myself, she's the schoolteacher, she's supposed to be the bright one in the family, I just bang metal and join tubes together for a living. I'm the stupid one that has been left out in the cold. I paid the babysitter and gave her a lift home, then I packed a bag with a few essentials and left Mandy's home for good. I got a hotel room for Saturday and Sunday nights, and when I got into work on the Monday morning I found out where there were vacancies elsewhere in the group. We were part of a national chain. There were a whole bunch of vacancies around the country, but the one that appealed to me most was over 200 miles away in Lincolnshire. I rang them up to express my interest, then their manager spoke to my manager and the deal was done same day, as simple as that. I started at my new place of work the following Monday. I rescheduled my planned fortnight's leave for our family holiday to start effectively, so I had the rest of the week off and drove up to Grantham later that day to stay in a hotel on Monday night and sought out digs to tide me over. Mandy did ring the office a number of times on Monday before I left, but as a rule we wouldn't leave the workshop while on a job in order to answer the phone, so the front desk man took messages for me to ring her urgently on my next break. I ignored every message, screwed them up and tossed them in the bin. I left my mobile phone switched off. By lunchtime I was finished there and on the road heading north. I didn't really settle in Grantham at first. The work was exactly the same, but I was used to warm, wet Atlantic westerlies. The weather that first winter away from home consisted of freezing cold easterlies off the North Sea, and I struggled to get used to it. The bay doors were always open, the locals were hardened to it. After 6 months I changed jobs and worked for a ducting company, making steel boxes for air conditioning or for sucking production offcuts out to waste compactors. It was mostly factory-based manufacturing, the ducting, with about a quarter of the time spent installing them in factories and offices in the Humberside, Lincolnshire, Leicestershire and Nottinghamshire areas. That was okay for a couple of years, but then the company started laying people off due to the recession and I found myself out on my ear. I applied to become a firefighter and passed all the tests. I was pretty fit, lean, strong and agile, wiry compared to some of the beefier guys. So, after basic training I was appointed a newly qualified firefighter at the Cleethorpes fire station. When I was an exhaust fitter I was paid weekly. Although I had left my family behind, I couldn't possibly ignore them completely. So each week I went into one of the nearby bank branches and transferred about half my net wages into our old joint account, to help with the upkeep of my kids. I decided early on that my kids would be better off having a stable home with Tanner and Mandy as dad and mom and not confuse them with having me and the unwanted party hovering in the background. That was one of the reasons for moving away, for my family, by keeping well away from them. I sent the kids money and cards on their birthdays as well as Christmas, but didn't sign any of the cards. I let Mandy worry about who to say they were from. I used banks and post offices in various places in Humberside and Lincolnshire so they wouldn't easily be able to track me down to the town I lived. When I moved to the ducting company I was forced on a monthly pay and didn't have enough savings to fall back on to make the usual weekly payments, so I also had to switch my payments to monthly. I sent Mandy a letter that first week explaining the situation, that I got a continent-bound driver going to Great Yarmouth to post for me when he got there. I hoped Mandy and Tanner would cope with the schedule change and not deprive my kids of their little treats. I didn't have a place of my own, I couldn't afford one with what I was left to live on, so I stayed in a succession of digs, lodgings, most recently with a family that had a new baby. They needed the extra income with only one wage coming in and I paid them cash in hand, which was convenient all round. I had been there 2 years or so and Mrs. Murray had broached the subject fairly recently that they were trying for another baby as brother or sister to Darren, and so my room would be needed as a nursery at some point in the near future. The rent I paid was just for the room and bed linen, no meals, but they let me keep some of my food in their fridge so I could make myself something when I was not working. Mrs. Murray had the washing machine going virtually every day anyway, so she offered to do my washing for me for a few pennies extra, which saved me a lot of wasted time and money in the local laundrette. They had a good kitchen at the fire station and we took turns in cooking a main meal for the whole of each shift, which I quite enjoyed doing. We didn't always manage to eat at the time we were supposed to, if any emergency came up, but it worked out well more often than not. When Mrs. Murray mentioned that I might have to move soon, I had looked into the possibility of buying a mobile home. I had no means to buy a traditional house or flat. I had saved a little bit of money and thought I might have enough for a minimum deposit for something really cheap. Then I would be paying out a lot more each month than I was now, taking ground rent, services and repayment installments into account. I looked at a few of the mobile homes available and some of them were already fitted with furniture, while others were shells. I had planned that I would forego a holiday this year and build up my savings for the imminent change. My accident scuppered those plans. Chapter 3: Family Values. I was tired and miserable and in agony, inside and out, lying in my hospital bed. I wondered what it would be like, going back to Mandy's house for my recovery. I couldn't bring myself to think of it as our home anymore. It was definitely hers. Possibly, despite what she said, theirs, irrespective of whoever they were. I started wondering then about the kids and how much their appearances must have changed in the last 5 years. Would I recognize them? Would they even recognize me? I was in conflict. Did I really want to see them? I had cut them out of my life with just token one-way gifts at Christmas and birthdays. It was all too emotional for me to cope with and I started crying again. Me, a big grown firefighter who feared nothing physical, crying quietly, tears streaming down my cheeks. It wasn't just that I had missed 5 years of my kids, it was the thought that I tried to exist since I left them without any hope in my life. This was why I was never able to commit to Sally. I wasn't able to take my life forward onto the next step until I faced up to where we had got to and what I had left behind. Mandy reached across and held my big rough left hand in both her hands. Her tiny hands were warm and comforting, but my mind was so full of contradictory thoughts. I looked her in the eyes and, although I tried to smile, I pulled my hand away from hers, saying gently, "Sorry, Mandy, I can't do this, yet." For yet, my mind was saying, never ever, but I didn't have the strength to say as much. Tears started in her eyes and she got up and went out of the ward. I was upset too, in agony, both physically and mentally, before finally relaxing into my pillows and closing my eyes. I think I must have dozed off until just before lunch came around, when the nurse woke me for my more than welcome medication. Mandy was back by then and sitting in the chair reading a newspaper. She must have returned while I slept on undisturbed. Saturday was the first day the consultant hadn't come round to see me and poke my injuries. I suppose they have to have the weekends off. I guessed that was fair enough. Maybe if I had earned enough money to have proper weekends to spend and rebuild my relationship with Mandy after Josh arrived, we wouldn't be in the mess we had gotten ourselves into. My lunch followed and Mandy helped by cutting up my food so I could let my right wrist get the rest it needed. The afternoon visiting time was interesting. The nurses seemed to regard Mandy as an auxiliary fixture, so they let me have more than one additional visitor at a time. Firstly, a couple of mates from the garage turned up, although they seemed to spend more time chatting up Mandy than they did conversing with boring old me. They brought me an envelope containing some wages owed to me from the previous week, which was a nice surprise. Then Station Officer Stafford turned up with my car keys, which he handed straight over to Mandy, with not a single reference to me. He was accompanied by my old mucker Brendan, who had fallen through the warehouse floor with me. He had been completely unhurt, other than shaken up, landing on a pile of pallets. All the beams and floorboards apparently went my way. Anyhow, the service had given him a week off work to recover from the shock. We had a good chinwag and Brendan took the opportunity to take a lot of photos with his mobile phone. He took snaps of me alone, with the boss, with Mandy and the boss, with Mandy and me, and then Mandy took one of us 3 firefighters together. We flicked through them on the screen. The one with the 3 of us together looked great. Mandy was a natural-born photographer, clearly. Before they left, so Stafford handed me a check, which the lads had collected from a whip round among the lads. I had tears in my eyes at their generosity. Although I was on sick pay, which covered me on full pay for the first 6 months and half pay for a further 6. That didn't anywhere near cover what I would lose from my usual service overtime plus the cash-in-hand income one got from my second job. The collection went some way towards making up some of that loss over the next few weeks, though, so I was pretty grateful for their generosity. While Mandy took her leave to drive my car over to the maze to pack and collect my stuff, there wasn't much of value there to worry about. Just my underwear drawer might be embarrassing. I checked the contents of the envelope from the garage. There was more than enough cash in there to cover what I would have paid into Mandy's account for the month, so I could at least settle up with her without having to go to the bank. There was sufficient surplus to fill up my car's fuel tank on her drive home on Sunday. The check from the fire crews would have to wait until I was mobile again and could get to a branch of my bank and pay it in. I think I must have dozed off during the afternoon because when I awoke my afternoon cup of tea was stone cold to the touch. Mandy had virtually bounced into the room, arousing me from a deep slumber where I had dreamed of the peace and quiet of a shaded glade with the sound of droning bumblebees and a sighing breeze. I spluttered on an injudicious mouthful of cold tea. Then she forced my ribs and shoulder to complain as I was encouraged to lean forward while she cheerfully plumped up my pillows for me. I blinked around the room where little appeared to have changed, although Mandy looked positively cheerful. "Guess what I've got for you," she beamed, then paused for effect, waiting for me to respond with a guess, for her amusement. I groaned inwardly. What was she playing at now? We married each getting on for 15 years ago and for the last third of the time since we have been entirely estranged. Happily separated on my part if you regard being resigned to the situation as a synonym for reasonable contentment. I don't think we had been all that happy when we were together, other than perhaps the first few years. Once she started working at the school with Gosford Bloody Tanner, we were finished as a couple and I'd had plenty of time to get used to that state of existence. It was something I had coped with well and had no problem with continuing. Beautiful as she was, I would be happy if I never saw Mandy ever again, yet she was acting around me like we were still a loving couple. "I don't want to play happy families, Amanda," I said firmly. "We are no longer friends, we are barely acquaintances anymore, we have nothing going on between us except for the kids, and that is not a strong enough reason for us to be anything other than civil during brief handovers between your time and mine with them. And that's only if we ever manage to agree on sharing the kids at some future date. There is no we, only me on my own and you on whatever you want to be, anything except us. On that basis I have no intention of ever playing games with you. You are a miserable spoilsport, honey, no wonder nobody wants to go out with you," she retorted, with her self-satisfied smile still on her lips. "Annabelle and I had a long talk about you over a pot of tea, when I was over there. So I know you've never mentioned having a girlfriend in the 2 years since you've been living there. You spend all your time at work or at your second job and mope around the place on your lonesome the rest of the time. So I know that there is no woman in your life." "Don't get your hopes up, honey," I snarled back. I may have come to distrust women so much that I've gone completely the other way. I may just not be ready to come out of the closet yet. I hoped that might take the smug smile off her face, but I should have remembered it was never a fair contest arguing with Amanda Collins née Wilson. That's why she had stayed and I was the one that went. I gave up and left after the adultery with Gosford Tanner because I knew if I remained there, even if we'd had a spare room, which we hadn't, of course, she'd talk me into accepting my position, and I knew I could never forget, I could never trust her ever again. I may not be a very happy person on my own, but away from her I felt I would be a lot less miserable somehow. Okay, she folded her arms, maintaining her provocative smirk. I couldn't see or hear her foot tapping under the bed, but I could well imagine it. Who's the lucky buddy lover then? If I am not ready to come out, then maybe my special friend or even friends might not want to be known either. I thought, she may have a good service and return game, but I can dink a few stop volleys over the net when I have to. I make that deuce. Mrs. Collins Wilson Bloody Tanner wannabe to serve. I did notice Brendan hug you last night for a moment longer than social etiquette called for, honey, she grinned, and I also noticed that, compared to your physical condition, he's a fine figure of a man. He is, I agreed, winking at her, very fine, I can vouch for that. And he is so proud of his 4 children, she grinned, he showed me the pictures, his youngest is keeping him awake at night this week teething. Damn, I had no return shot in the locker. Advantage Mrs. Collins Wilson Bloody Tanner. She looked at me beaming, her cheating face beautiful, instantly reminding me of her look of ecstasy while being served by Gosford Bloody Tanner. I could still hear her words of encouragement to her lover back then echoing in my brain, words I had previously thought of exclusively as mine only. Out of it she said she was, but no, she knew exactly what she was doing, then and now. Now I come to think of it, when we used to make love she was always quiet, so I never knew if what I was doing was agreeable to her or not. Clearly I wasn't. I always assumed as we moved from childhood friends to courtship and marriage that like me we had always been exclusive. I know she was my only lover, I have never actually asked her if I was also her only lover up to that point. I guess I had always been fumbling around in the dark, with little encouragement other than a general impression of get on with it for goodness sake. I do remember very clearly though that under Gosford Tanner's skillful attention she was screaming the bloody house down, so everybody giggling to each other at that party knew what was going on and why I found their bedroom so easily. My eyes watered, she noticed. "Are you in pain, honey?" "I guess I am," I replied, without giving her the satisfaction of knowing it wasn't just the accident. I had been enduring the same agonizing pain for pushing 60 months that the woman I had loved didn't love me one little bit. It had all been a lie. "We'll soon have you home and getting you back on your feet." She smiled, absolutely clueless as to what thoughts and memories that I was suffering from. "Merv called back this afternoon and said he had good news for us." "That's the good news that I wanted to tell you." "Merv?" I asked. "Who's Merv when he's at home?" She tut-tooted, "Mervyn Stafford, your station boss, dummy. He prefers Mervyn rather than Merv," but I got carried away calling him Mervyn the excitement, and he said he didn't mind at all when I apologized. "Merv's managed to organize you a lift home." I was speechless. I didn't even know Station Officer Stafford had a first name. I had never called him by anything other than Sir or Station Officer Stafford in the 2 years I'd known him, and we certainly hadn't exchanged mobile phone numbers. The lads all called him Slinky, because he used to creep about trying to catch us asleep or skiving on duty, but we never called him that to his face, of course. Now Stafford was calling Mandy's mobile and working in her bloody interest to get me to recuperate at her house. Whatever happened to bloody firefighter solidarity of comrades under fire? Gaiman first set to Mrs. Collins Wilson Bloody Tanner, who now leads one set to love, "New balls please." They were her new balls all right, while my old ones were shriveling away to nothing, like a sad pair of drifting icebergs who found themselves in the Mediterranean in August. How could I possibly get myself back in the game, let alone win against such odds? The rest of the day passed relatively uneventfully with me wishing my life away until Sunday, when Mandy could drive home with all my bloody worldly goods in my car. That reminded me to give her the money received from the garage. Mandy then told me that since she was teaching full-time and had been for 3 years, my regular contribution wasn't so important to her anymore. In fact, for the last couple of years she had been splitting the money between our children's 3 trust funds on a 45/35/20 basis to help towards their further education costs. She decided Josh needed more as his fund had less time left to grow. It made sense to me. I said if that was the case, if she would give me their account numbers I could pay them in direct by standing order once I can get down to the bank. I volunteered the thought that if I had been aware it was going direct to the children I might have been prepared to pay in even more. She looked daggers at me but only agreed it was a good idea and she would look out the account numbers for me when she got home. No visitors on Saturday night, so she fetched a game of Scrabble up from the hospital playroom. I know I had said I didn't want to play games with her, but I was just as bored by then as she was. The pair of us were sitting together for hours on end and barely exchanging a word. It was just like being married again, I thought cynically. Anyway, as usual, she beat me hands down until it was time to pack up for my bedtime. She hammered me on all the long words, but I finished using up my tiles more often because I almost always managed to fit my last few letters in. I was just too far behind by then to catch up most of the time. I slept quite well that night, though, surprisingly. Perhaps my mind needed to be as tired as my aching body in order to sleep. Sunday was my most exiting day in hospital to date. Mandy turned up early in the morning, while I was still having my breakfast. I think she was looking forward to my daily bed bath. I suppose one of us had to. She brought up a bundle of newspapers and started reading them while sipping a mug of coffee she had brought with her. She knew by then what hospital coffee was like. It was worse than the tea, and that was barely drinkable. Suddenly, Mandy exclaimed, stood up and thrust one of the national newspapers in front of me. There on one of the inside pages was a half-page picture of me in my hospital bed with Stafford and Brendan sitting either side of me, all with our thumbs in the air. That was the photo that Mandy took of us on Brendan's bloody mobile phone. I'll murder him when I see him again, I thought out loud. His 4 kids and missus'll be wearing black as soon as I get on my feet. I hadn't seen myself in a mirror since the incident and I looked a mess in that blown-up photo, with 4 days beard growth, a gash on my forehead, surrounded by bruises, both eyes blackened, the left one puffy and a quarter closed, one cheek was tinged with purple blue, the other bright mustard yellow, with a number of scratches on my cheek and jaw. The only thing surprisingly untouched was my nose. I don't think even my mother would have recognized me unless someone insisted she take a second look. Mandy snatched the paper back and started reading the text. Merv is quoted here as saying that you are the best and bravest firefighter on his team, says you've received 3 bravery commendations, read Mandy, then looking up and adding, when Josh searched online he found you mentioned in the local paper several times, rescuing people. It's all exaggerated, Mandy, I said quietly, I was just a member of a team, that's all. But Merv says dash. Stafford is a bloody idiot, a paper pusher, he was last a proper firefighter over 20 years ago. Okay, I did get 1 commendation but the other 2 were just special mentions, which is nowhere near the same thing, and I was never on my own. I was always with buddies who put their lives on the line every single day they go out there not knowing what they are going to have to tackle. Most of it though is just routine. So what was the 1 commendation for? I threw 3 very young kids out of a front bedroom window to my guys below. I admitted, there was no real danger from fire, just smoke. I had a respirator if I needed it myself and I'd given each of the kids a breath each when I got to them. The local paper printed a still photo of me, which appeared on the front page. It looked very dramatic with smoke billowing out the window that I had just smashed and showed me just releasing the last kid. There were no flames, our lives were not in danger, the fire was in the living room and my mates were busy tackling that. I just wanted to get the kids out of the smoke and there was no way I could carry the 3 kids down the stairs in one go. And I wasn't considering leaving one behind. Someone living in a house opposite had recorded the scene on his video camera and put it up on YouTube. My nameplate on my chest stood out in the shot, so the station was bombarded with calls and Stafford was forced against his better judgment to commend me. If I'd thrown those kids out of the back bloody bedroom window no one would have been any the wiser and I wouldn't have had to put up with any of the fuss and bother. Mandy squeezed my hand. Well, I still think you're a hero. I think I scowled. Bed bath time was fun. Well, it was for Mandy and the young nurse that helped, definitely not for me, but at least I insisted on getting my first shave for about a week. It was really starting to get scratchy and the picture in the paper made me want the shave even more. Yes, I did get an embarrassing reaction downstairs, thank you very much, and I apologized profusely to the young nurse. Wilma must have been on a different shift that morning. The nurse laughed and barely batted an eyelid. I guess they get used to that sort of thing very quickly. I could have wound Mandy up about it, blaming the young nurse for the reaction, which was in stark contrast to the previous day, but to be honest I was all out of cheap shots. They had to change the bed sheets as well, which led to some really painful manhandling and made me ache for hours afterwards. Mandy had also taken over the bedpan duties as well by now, which was really playing strange mind games with my head. I don't know what it was doing for her, but I guess she felt she needed to get used to doing it for when I was in her charge. I hoped by then I would be able to use crutches and take care of these functions myself. Lunch followed very quietly, with Mandy attentive but restrained, although with the smallest trace of a smile playing on her face, which I found was mildly annoying. I imagined both of us were thinking thoughts that neither of us were prepared to voice. We were dancing around each other, although she had all the moves. Naturally I was pretty well immobile. It was afternoon visiting time that the symbolic fan turned a distinct shade of brown. There was this sudden shriek of Jimmy from the doorway and a bundle of boundless energy bounded across the room and thrust her arms around me, fit to squeeze out what life I had left in me. All I could see was red hair over my eyes and felt wet tears mixed with the kisses that rained down on my cheeks and neck and lips. Baby, baby, the new arrival sobbed, I thought I'd lost you forever and then Mum pointed you out in this morning's papers. She stopped kissing me and lifted her head to regard me, frowning, running light fingertips over my scabbed cuts, stitches and bruises. I wiped the tears away from her eyes and cheeks with my left hand. Sal, I said, I'm okay, really I'm fine, they are looking after me in here really well. I'll be right as rain in a few months. Sally kissed me on the lips once more, locking down firm and passionately on them. Oh my! I remembered those kisses from when we were courting. My lips were always so bruised, the guys at the ducting company reckoned I looked as though I was having regular Botox injections. Sally was a tiny bundle of energetic lovemaking. Redhead, with a frizzy natural perm, her hair out almost to the width of her shoulders, she really stood out of a crowd. She was shorter than Mandy by an inch or so, barely 5 foot high, but with big breasts and hips and a narrow waist. She was loud and brash and very funny. She always made me laugh. Passionate? Oh yes, she was passionate all right, with knobs on. Trouble was she was very young, far too young for me if truth be known. When we parted, after about 18 months of dating, I was 31 and she was only 21. She had this half-formed notion to settle down at the time. She suggested that we get a place together, get married eventually, and raise a big family. When we first started going out, she was only 19 and worked at the ducting company in the office administration department. I never thought our relationship would last more than a couple of dates, so I never told her anything about my existing family. Those first couple of dates turned into a handful over the first 12 months and then stretched into a sequence, and soon we were making out seriously. After a month or so of going steady, the subject of sex came up. Okay, Sally brought it up, I didn't. She was keen, I was reluctant. Damn, my body didn't have any reservations, but my conscience was screaming out no way. Sally couldn't understand what was wrong with me, and I couldn't explain why or even why I had kept mum about my wife and kids. The story of my life so far, not able to communicate with the women in my life, even my mum had no idea what was going through my head. In the end, about 14 months into the relationship, she just jumped me one night after a few drinks and I gave in. No willpower, me. Sally moaned as she kissed me, her left hand behind my head and her right hand roaming around my body, until it eventually brushed against the tent which had miraculously appeared in my thin sheet covering me. She broke off the kiss, smiling broadly, and we both looked down. There was no doubt about it, Sally could get me going like no other woman I knew until then, which was a very select club at the time, with a membership of just 2. Which reminded me that Mandy. Sally grinned at me and cooed, "Is that all for me, baby?" She looked up around her, saying, "Can we close these curtains?" Then she froze when her eyes locked onto Mandy's eyes, who was looking at her with cold blue steel eyes, now standing up from the chair on the other side of the bed. Sally's green eyes flashed back at me. "Who's this, baby? A volunteer visitor? Oh, boy. It's definitely hit the fan now. War was about to be declared and I was in no man's land without a single friendly stretcher bearer in sight. Hell, IDVE accepted being carted off by one of the enemy. This is Mandy," I said. "Mandy, this is Sally." Did I think that a perfunctory introduction would suffice? No, I'm pretty dumb and uneducated, but I'm not totally stupid. It was more a delaying tactic, putting off the inevitable storm, of course, but what would you have done in the circumstances? Be honest now. Mandy spoke up first. "And, honey, Sally is," directing her question at me with raised eyebrows. I imagined her hackles were up to as high a level as they get before exploding. "And honey," Sally turned to me, her green eyes moist and shiny. "Baby," she asked, and that meant I was busted by both women. "Sally, I would like you to meet Amanda Collins, my estranged wife and mother of my 3 children. Mandy, I would like you to meet Sally O'Sullivan, the woman I love." Mandy sat back down in the chair with a bump at that. Sally shrieked again and virtually suffocated me with another passionate bout of kisses. Baby, do you really love me?" "I do, sweetheart, with all my heart." "Oh, baby," she breathed, "me too. I missed you so much, Jimmy." She hadn't changed much in the 2 years since I had seen her last. Hair looked a little longer, shoulder-length frizzy red hair and all over the place, quite frankly. Her face pale, she stayed out of the sun if she could, with brown freckles on her pink nose and cheeks, a tiny ruby stud decorating her left nostril. I had felt the resident tongue stud when she kissed me earlier, bringing back delicious memories which had definitely manifested itself in a physical reaction, noticed by both the women in my life. Now was definitely not the time to bring up any nagging doubts in my head. Sally and I had stopped going out about a month before I received my layoff notice at the ducting company, which was over 2 years ago now. She had wanted us to move on to the next logical step in our relationship. Sally was fed up with making love in the back of my car or hotel rooms on holiday, and we couldn't do anything at my digs or her mother's house. She was looking at apartment rentals in the local newspaper, and I was trying to discourage her but found myself unable to explain to her the reasons why. I don't even know why I was reluctant to tell her about my other family. Shame that I had resorted to running away rather than stay in battle to keep my wife. I think. Sally became upset over the lack of development in our relationship, and she cooled towards me almost immediately. We stopped talking, we stopped going out, and after a month of silence between us, I was also given my career-altering marching orders and left the ducting company we both worked at with immediate effect. The job center suggested the fire service. They were looking for suitable people, I was looking for anything suitable, so they put us together. I heard from mates at the ducting company that they had seen Sally going out with someone else, and they wondered what happened to us guys. I told them that we were both free agents again. When I finished basic training, I moved 60 miles away to Cleethorpes and Sally, and I never made contact again. When I next upgraded my mobile phone, I cleared away the redundant numbers, and Sally's mobile and Sally's mom's landline numbers were included in the call. When Mandy was out of the way, I would have to ask Sally about who she was or had been going out with. In the meantime, I wasn't above using her as a tool against Mandy. As for announcing that Sally was the woman I loved, I really didn't know where that crazy thought came from. I hadn't planned on saying anything like that, it just popped out. I was very fond of her, but in the same way I regarded Mandy, I had trust issues that would have to be thoroughly addressed before going forward with any thoughts of a serious relationship in the future. I was just not equipped to handle those particular concerns at this juncture. All this flashed through my thick head as Sally buried her moist hot tongue once more into my dry mouth, trying her best to whip my tonsils into mush with her silver stud. When we surfaced, Sally looked flushed, her freckles looked enlarged to the size of pennies, and Mandy appeared decidedly pale and pissed at the pair of us, sitting with her arms folded. She was probably wondering where the hell this rival, this very attractive and much younger woman, had emerged from, when she had been led to believe there was no other woman in my life. "Mandy, you wouldn't mind giving us some privacy, would you?" I asked in as neutral a voice as I could manage, while I catch up with my girlfriend. Mandy got up and started towards the door, turned back momentarily as an afterthought, and picked up her shoulder bag and coat. Then, with a final look up at the pair of us, she went out without a word. "She's frosty," commented Sally, almost but not quite as soon as we were alone, "and she's old, no wonder you dumped her, baby." "Hold on, Sally," I said, disentangling her arms from around my neck, a difficult thing to do when you only have one hand, and she seemed very determined to stay put. Although Mandy and I have been apart for 5 years, that doesn't give you license to slag her off. For a start, she's exactly the same age as me. Maybe, she grinned, still rubbing her hands over my shoulders and chest, eluding my limited attempts with my left hand to stop her. "You're buff. Been working out, baby?" I shook my head and laughed. "Well, you are not exactly seeing me at my best right now, but I do put in a lot more exercise and gym work as a firefighter than I ever did making metal boxes. It shows, baby, it shows." Her hands wandered down to my nether regions again, which seemed to have this veritable flagpole permanently marking the spot. "Behave, Sal," I warned, "we are not in private, and besides, if you remember, we split up over 2 years ago and haven't been in contact all that time, so you can't expect to simply pick up where we left off." "I know, baby," Sally said, disconsolately, "I know. I was wrong to push the issue with you at the time. But I am here for you now." Sally took off her yellow day-glow jacket and sat in the chair that Mandy had just vacated, idly picking at a tiny bit of fluff on her jeans. "Still got the scooter?" I asked after a few moments. "Got a nearly new Vespa, 8 months ago," she beamed, green eyes flashing, "goes like stink. Got a spare helmet for you when you get back on your feet." "I might take you up on that," I smiled. "Oh, I forgot the basket of fruit," she said, and scooted round the bed and picked up her bike helmet and a basket of fruit from the floor and put it on the bedside table. I couldn't help notice another bloody pineapple prominently displayed in the arrangement. We lapsed into silence for a while. "I know I said she was old," Sally said quietly, breaking the silence. "She's very beautiful, so I can see why you were attracted to her." I nodded. "You two back together, or thinking of it?" she asked. She wants me to move back home to Portsmouth for nursing, recovery, recuperation, engage with the kids again, you know? IN. Sword, not sure if she wants me back for herself, but even as an unreceptive man, I am picking up a few hints. Men. Sally snorted, I've only seen her for 20 seconds and I know she's serving herself to you on a platter. I've got my work cut out if I've any chance of keeping you for myself. Is that what you want? I asked. You dumped me once, remember? I know, Sally said quietly, and it didn't take me very long to find out I was wrong. I heard from our old workmates that you were dating again. I did go out with a few guys, but they meant nothing to me. They were boys, while you're a man, a really good man. You treated me with respect, you were polite, attentive, never pushy, or took me for granted. Baby, you spoiled me for any other man alive, unless Brad Pitt goes back on the market. I held out my hand, she reached out and held it tightly, pulling the chair close behind her. She pulled my hand to her lips, then laid it down and rested her carrot-red head on my hand. I couldn't see from where I was, but I think her eyes were closed. At the end of visiting time, Mandy returned and hovered at the entranceway to the ward. Sally raised her head after hearing the nurse call out that visiting time was over, kissed me passionately and said she would be back to see me at evening visiting time. She collected her helmet, tucked her outer coat over her arm and brushed past Mandy without a word to her. So, Mandy began, after Sally had completely disappeared out of the ward, you certainly got me there, honey. Where the hell did that redhead pop up from? I think she was wondering if her new friend Annabelle had sold her a pup regarding my relationships. I went out with her for a couple of years, then lost contact recently, which was an exaggeration on my part, which I couldn't resist. And you still love her? I dunno really, man, I said in exasperation. Honestly, you've both of you got me confused. Having you here and now Sal turning up has thrown me. I don't know if I am coming or going. Can Sally look after you while you recuperate? I don't expect so, man, I haven't even asked her. She used to live with her mom, I assume she still does, and her mom didn't like me much. Her mom's not much older than you and me. Would you prefer to be with her instead of with me and your children? No contest, man, with Sally I see the possibility of a future, with you and the kids all I see is the past, and a past that I don't want to repeat. I shrugged. I see, she replied sadly, was it really that bad for you? You dissed me for years, man, I wasn't totally happy living with you for a long time. Gosford Tanner was just the final straw. Well, I'm still bringing the children up with me next Friday so they can see you, are you okay with that? You do what you think best. Thinking that she would anyway, whatever I said. I think it is the best thing for them, and that is now my only concern, James. Give it some serious thought about coming home and staying with us until you are recovered. Merv has already arranged for an air ambulance to bring you down when the doctors eventually release you. I still think it's your best option, for you as well as us. I thought time would tell. Not a lot I could do about it, my destiny was no longer in my hands, at least until I was fully mobile again. I had lost my own fixed address and rendered homeless, and Mandy had all my worldly possessions in her hands. I had very few savings behind me, and my wage-earning potential was seriously curtailed for a period possibly for up to the next 12 months, so I would likely need every penny of my meager reserves to fall back on. Mandy took her leave of me late in the afternoon on Sunday, facing a long drive home in my second-hand car. Mandy promised she would be back sometime on Friday evening with the kids in tow. Sally visited me that evening. We discussed whether her mother would consider putting me up for at least 2 months while I was bedridden. She was honest, thinking that it was unlikely, but she would speak to her mother about it anyway. Sally didn't know why her mom didn't like me. She had always been polite but frosty in her dealings with me. We discussed the problems we had had with our respective relationships. I explained what had happened with Mandy and myself and why I was reluctant to go back to her. We also discussed Sally's relationships over the past couple of years. I had concerns how she felt about us. She said that when we were going out she was conscious of both my lack of commitment to permanency and her mixed feelings of wanting to take the next step to cohabitation. In her mind I had seemed to be steady and reliable, but indecisive. Cooling our relationship at the time she thought would either force me to commit, or if I disappeared altogether it would give her the opportunity to improve her chances elsewhere. Well, I disappeared, which confirmed to her that I was not fully committed to her. However, although she had been out on dozens of dates with several different guys, she hadn't felt like turning any into permanent relationships. Sally assured me that I was the only one she loved and wanted to share her life with. When I asked if she had a current boyfriend, she looked at me straight in the eye and said she had finished with her most recent boyfriend a couple of weeks before. With that out of the way, Sally wanted to know about my kids and what did I think about her getting to know them and, if we did get a place together, having them up to visit so that she could be part of their lives. I assured her that I was more than happy for her to get to know them. What was more difficult to reconcile, though, was the way I felt about my kids. I recognized that I had missed them and assumed that they had equally missed me in their turn. I was frankly accepting that I didn't miss them as much as I thought I would when I left. Having worked extra hours and days over the years, I had allowed Mandy to take on the major share of the child rearing, and I didn't have anything like the close relationship with them that Mandy had taken the effort to construct. I confessed to Sally that I was dreading seeing them again this coming weekend. Nurse Wilma expressed her displeasure of me seeing Sally behind your wife's back as she saw it. I explained that Mandy and I separated 5 years ago and that Sally was in my life now. Nurse Wilma couldn't accept that answer and handled me particularly roughly when changing my dressings and bed bathing me during the week. The same message got through to the rest of the nurses too, and I found myself cold-shouldered for the most part. The week dragged and I was becoming very apprehensive as Friday approached. The lapsing of time spent almost completely inactive in hospital slowed to a snail's pace. The highlights of the 2 brief visiting periods each day were in stark contrast to the hours of inactivity, where I was left to brood on what has been and what was still to come. Another highlight was the commencement of physiotherapy in midweek, when I was temporarily relieved of the tension on my knitting broken leg and wheeled down to the exercise suite for an hour or two. This was the modern equivalent of medieval torture, the cheerfully effervescent young woman leading me through the exercises that she wanted me to perform when I was back in the ward. Before guiding me through those, she subjected my body to a number of maneuvers designed to show the mobility of each joint in my limbs and torso. I always thought I was fit as a tough firefighter, but Maddie soon disaffected me of that ridiculous notion and every part of my body ached until long after bedtime that night. Station Officer Stafford showed up during the week and explained that when the doctors gave us the all clear, the air ambulance service would collect me from the hospital roof and convey me to the roof of the nearest hospital to Mandy's house, and a conventional ambulance would then take me the rest of the way. The service had even arranged for an appropriate hospital bed to be delivered and set up in Mandy's dining room ahead of the move. Brendan also showed his embarrassed face, full of apologies, knowing that I was hardly in a position to chase him around the room and dish out the revenge which burned in my heart. At least he split the small fee received from the paper with me, which went some way to repair the damage. It was Monday early evening, though, that the proverbial hit the fan again. A television cameraman, along with interviewer and floodlights, invaded the tiny ward, with me as its focal point. I was livid. How the night ward sister allowed it without my express approval was disgraceful. I was peacefully dozing, having enjoyed my dinner of sausages and mash with onion gravy, looking forward to visiting time, expecting Sally to come in after work to see me. Suddenly, there were lights and a pushy female interviewer was thrusting a microphone in my face and throwing stupid questions about how I feel. I know, I used quite a few expletives. Sally came in just at that point and gave them a telling off, using even more choice words than I was accustomed to using or even hearing down at the station. The interviewer, a woman no older than Sally, refused to take no for an answer, so the diminutive Sal, carrying a plastic carrier bag of oranges, swung her bag at first the interviewer and the cameraman like an old-fashioned mace. The cameraman retreated backwards, keeping the camera going the whole time while Sally kept up a rain of blows with her fruity weapon until the objects of her ire left the ward in full rout. At the final moment, the plastic of the bag gave way and the interviewer, followed shortly by the camera lens itself, were doused in a mixture of orange pulp and juice. When Sally calmed down enough to sit down in the chair, having dumped her tattered bag in the litter bin, I cheered her by offering her a single grape. We both laughed heartily in relief as the adrenaline leached from both our bodies. A minute-long severely edited version of the interview appeared on the regional news program at 9 o'clock, but a viral edition with hardly any editing soon showed up on YouTube, which apparently had so many hits worldwide it was featured, with its unbelievable rat-tat-tat of covering bleeps, on a weekly television program devoted to the most popular internet clips of the week. It featured in the top 10 clips for the next 2 months. The final shot of the lens completely covered in orange juice with pips sliding down was magical. Friday evening came, and quite late on in the visiting period, with Sally perched on the arm of the chair holding my hand, Mandy showed up alone at the entrance to the ward. She smiled briefly, offered Sally a hug, thanking her for looking after me during the week, and then gave me a small hug. While she hugged me, Sally pulled a chair over from one of the other beds that had a spare and sat herself down on it. Mandy had brought up some more sets of pajamas, expressing gratitude to Sally for looking after the laundering of my 2 threadbare existing ones during the week. With my leg now permanently out of traction, it was easier to wear my bottoms, so I was a lot more comfortable. Once the initial pleasantries had been exchanged, Mandy brought up the subject of where I was going to be spending my recovery. Sally spoke up before I could, although I already knew the answer. Sally's mother was not in a position to help in that respect, so we had agreed that we would happily fall back on Mandy's offer to put me up during the months of my convalescence. Sally would come down by train on Saturday morning, stay in a cheap motel for the night, and go back home on Sunday afternoon. That out of the way, Mandy cheered up, and I was then able to ask where the kids were. Had she changed her mind about bringing them up? No, they were at the hotel checking in, and Mandy would bring them over the next day. The younger kids particularly were tired and hungry after the long journey on a busy Friday late afternoon and early evening. Mandy had already spoken to her ally, the ward sister, and would be bringing them over in the morning, after breakfast, but before I was wheeled away to the gym. Mandy's mother, Madge, was with them and was currently settling them in for the night. What is it with me and the mothers of the 2 women in my life? Neither of them could stand the sight of me. Madge was particularly strange. She was absolutely great while Mandy and I were kids. In fact, she was virtually a second mother to me. Once best friendship between her beloved daughter and me turned into courtship and love, however, daggers were drawn, and she did everything in her power to question my suitability as a potential spouse. She had a point. Mandy was bright and clever, did well at school. I was strong and active, hated being cooped up in a classroom, so left school as soon as possible. I thought I did the best I could for Mandy. I saved hard so that we could get a place of our own while she continued her further education. Even after we married, Madge kept up her wheedling, forever undermining our relationship. Ultimately, I believe Madge's sniping at me led to Mandy losing her respect for me as a husband, setting Mandy's attitude towards me, which led to what happened with Gosford Tanner. Visiting time ended all too quickly, and those awkward 30 minutes when the 3 of us were together was brought to a close by Sally saying goodbye to me particularly passionately, further establishing her ownership rights in Mandy's presence. Mandy was able to stay another 30 minutes beyond the prescribed period, having been granted privileges over and above other visitors. I never found out how she managed it. Josh was the first of my children to visit the next morning, just after breakfast, walking straight up to me and giving me a high five. He had shot up in size, and I wouldn't have recognized him if I saw him in the street. He was going to end up taller and better built than me. Then he sat down and played with a game console he had brought with him and ignored me like the teenager he was. I was just touched he turned up at all. Josh was immediately followed by my little girls, who were very shy, and it was quite a while before they would come close and give me a hug, despite my encouragement. They were petite and delicate, taking their appearances and hair coloring from Mandy. My ex-wife accompanied them, of course, but she had to go off and talk with the consultant for over an hour to discuss my case. It appears I was wrong. They do sometimes come in on Saturdays. So, I was left in company with Madge, who was put in charge of the kids, and me as well, probably. Actually, she seemed quite warm and cheerful, which made me even more wary of her. By the time Mandy came back, we had been joined by Station Officer Stafford. I still couldn't call him Merv. Mandy and Merv greeted each other as old friends, giving each other better hugs than I had had from her after virtually 5 years' absence. Stafford gave her the lowdown on what was arranged regarding getting me down to the south, and Mandy told him that she had already met with the consultant in Portsmouth who would be taking me on, as well as the physiotherapy department. I felt like the excess baggage in the group without the luxury of being able to walk off and leave them all to it. Madge was smiling at my discomfiture and made a point of rubbing it in with little asides. I wasn't feeling too good, to be honest, surrounded by my family, mother-in-law chipping away at my confidence, my wife happily chatting to my boss about me as if I wasn't even there, my son playing on his console, and my 2 girls playing together with some stuffed dolls they had collected from the play area down the corridor. I was just the spare dick at the wedding, just like I had been the last few years of my marriage. To cap it all, Nurse Wilma walked past, seeing my miserable face, and smiled as she rolled up her eyes. Yes, I felt like the last 5 years had gone by and I was no further forward than the day I threw up my old unsatisfactory life and walked out on the lot of them. At least Sally came visiting in the evening, and seeing Mandy, Sally and Madge dance around one another was something to behold. Sally sat in the chair next to my one free hand, holding it as if her life depended on it, while Mandy sat on the other side of me, next to her mother, both of them staring daggers at the pair of us. The kids seemed happier going back and forth between the playroom and the ward, begging spare change for the snack dispensers and the reception. Mandy wouldn't let the girls go on their own, so Josh was roped in reluctantly. At one point Sally offered to take them, and Mandy even let her with a barely noticeable hesitation on her part. The next day was a repeat of the Saturday, with an uneasy peace reigning over both afternoon and evening visiting times. At some point, Mandy asked Sally to speak to her in another room, and Madge and the kids gave me their undivided attention. At least the girls had softened in their attitude to me. Towards the end of visiting time, Mandy got up to take her leave of me, saying she would next see me when I was delivered to her home in the next 3 to 5 days. The kids all squeezed and kissed me, while Josh submitted to a hug, and off they trooped. Sally naughtily drew the curtains round and, well, with her hand made sure I would look forward to her next visiting time. A couple more days with the physio Maddie manipulating my limbs, and she signed me over to my new physiotherapist team in Portsmouth. She said she was sorry to see me go and was sure I'd be fine if I kept up her program of exercises that I could do on my own. I had a purpose in completing those exercises. I wanted to get away from Mandy and back to the work I loved doing as soon as was humanly possible. I was wheeled into a private ward on my own on the Wednesday morning, which made it easier for visiting times. The guys from the station all came down that evening as they came off shift. Stafford came too and let me know that the move was all on for the next morning. I teed up Sally and she said she would come down to Portsmouth by train Friday night and stay in a hotel nearby for the 2 nights and travel back on Sunday. She had already looked up train times. It was much too far for her to travel down on her little scooter. Chapter 4, Home Alone. I would like to say the trip down on Thursday was painless. It wasn't. I definitely had my meds before we left, although it seemed to wear off damned quick. All the guys from the station were outside with the fire engines blues and twos going while they saw me off. The guys in the air ambulance were marvelous. I can't praise them high enough. Soon I was back in my old hometown and among familiar southern accents again. The place even smelled like home. I knew that whatever happened, whoever I ended up living with, I wanted to be back in Pompey again. I guess the whole trip took 4 or 5 hours, but to me it seemed like it lasted the whole day. I was exhausted by the time I got to Mandy's house, my old house, in the late afternoon. They were all there to greet me when the ambulance brought me from the general hospital: Mandy, Madge, the kids, naturally. The big surprise was that even Sally was there. Later, as Mandy and Madge shooed the kids away to do their homework before tea, leaving Sally and I alone for a few minutes, Sally owned up that the surprise was all down to Mandy. On the Sunday before Mandy departed, she had suggested that Sally come down and she had agreed, taking a couple of days off work. Mandy brought our meals through to the old dining room where my bed was set up and left Sally and I alone to talk. Sally was going to be sleeping in the sitting room. Mandy had a sofa bed in there for Sally to use on the Friday and Saturday nights she came down to visit, with the addition of Thursday night this first week. Mandy had to work for 1 more day this week and 3 the next week before the schools broke up for the long summer holiday. Sally would look after me Friday, then they would share the nursing duties over the weekend before Sally traveled home on the train on Sunday afternoon and evening. Apparently, Mandy had arranged for Madge to look after me on Monday through to Wednesday. I groaned, not looking forward to that. The evening was fun, actually. I was tired and in pain from all the jostling I had suffered earlier, but we played games with a lot of laughs and Sally was very relaxed and seemed to be getting on particularly well with my 2 girls. Eventually Mandy could see I was tiring, and it was still a school night for the kids, so they were shooed off to get ready for bed and Sally washed me and helped me clean my teeth before it was lights out. I think I slept sounder that night than I had in weeks. Everybody was busy getting off to school in the morning. Sally was up early and assured Mandy that she would clean up the breakfast things and make the beds after them, so she packed them off and then got me my breakfast. I was mobile enough now to use the toilet on my own. My shoulder and wrist were able to take the strain of crutches for short bursts, but my ribs were still threatening to burst, so I needed a lot of help getting down. There may not have been much of Sally build-wise, but she was strong and helped me with that and have a wash down in the downstairs cloakroom, although it was so tight-fitting that we spilled out into the hallway. I had a health visitor come give me the once-over mid-morning. She checked me against her notes and assessed I was ready for physiotherapy and got busy on the phone getting me booked in daily from Monday. It was a relief to lie down on the bed again after the examination and prodding. Then Sally went and jumped my bones, God bless her. She was on top and very energetic. The house was empty and we could let ourselves go without upsetting anyone. Phew. To say I needed that would be an understatement. We laughed like kids afterwards, and she decided I needed another blanket bath. Still giggling, that bath led to a repeat session, only much less frenetic and a lot more loving. Sally prepared a light lunch while I managed to sit with my broken leg outstretched in the kitchen. I had another lie down and dozed for a little while, as Sally cleaned up the kitchen. When she came back and woke me up gently, we went for third time lucky, and certainly I couldn't believe how much luck I was having. I think Mandy sensed what had gone on between us when she came in that evening. Sally and I kept giggling, sharing our little secret that didn't appear to be very secret at all. Mandy had a strange look on her face during that evening that I couldn't read exactly, but it did make me feel uneasy. Then I began to feel guilty. I couldn't help it. Unfaithful, I was. Mandy was still my wife and we were living under her roof. She had invited Sally into her home on unspoken trust, and I felt that between us Sally and I had let her down. It didn't matter what Mandy had done with Gosford Tanner, that was for her to deal with as I had dealt with it in my own way. This time it was me that had crossed the line and I felt really bad about it. It was great having Sally there though, over that first weekend out of hospital, and the girls loved her too, and when Sally wasn't lavishing attention on me, she was huddled with the girls, whispering and laughing about things that girls discuss that were beyond my comprehension. Those moments made it feel that we were becoming like a family, an odd one, I had to admit, but that is how I felt. I began to entertain the idea of spending the rest of my life with Sally and enjoying our extended family. Sunday afternoon Sally said her goodbyes and went off to catch the train home. I got out of bed for a while and sat with Mandy watching a bit of TV, but nothing really took my interest and Mandy clearly didn't want to talk to me, so I went back to bed for an early night. Relations were understandably strained between us, to say the least. Next morning everybody bustled round getting off to work, with Mandy taking my beat-up old car to work, leaving her smart and spacious people carrier behind for her mother to use to take me to physiotherapy. Madge turned up mid-morning and treated me like dirt as usual. I tried to ignore her, but with some difficulty on my part. I managed to haul myself into the front passenger seat with the seat pushed back as far as possible and was able to get my leg, encased in a single cast, in and nurse my crutches on the journey. We set off in frosty silence. It didn't last long though before Madge spoke up. "I don't know how you can sit there all innocent-like and bring that woman you were having an affair with to stay under the same roof as your wife and family," Madge said bitterly. "I didn't invite her to stay, Madge, Mandy did. I understood Sally was going to stay in a hotel, they changed the arrangements between themselves. I was not consulted, took no part in the decision process and was, as usual, the last one to know. Well, Amanda is a saint, I certainly wouldn't put up with it under my roof. In fact, I wouldn't even take you back in the house if it was my choice." "Well, she's not you, is she? You don't deserve Amanda," Madge snapped. "Why she allowed you home and is prepared to look after you is beyond me." "Well, I don't know why either, and I don't have any choice in the matter. I don't want to be here any more than you want me here. So what the hell are you doing back here anyway?" "I don't know that either, you'll have to ask Mandy. She was the one that had me evicted from my digs, she even stole my bloody car from me. I would have been more than happy enough to have gone back to my digs, because I didn't have to move out for another 4 or 5 months. Any of the lads from the service would have ferried me about for a few weeks until I got back on my feet. Amanda must still be in love with you, then, Lord only knows why. She rang me in tears on Saturday morning because she knew that you and that girl had had sex in her house. She should divorce you just for that alone, even forgetting about the desertion for the last 5 years. She'd had plenty of time in those 5 years to divorce me if she wanted to. So she should have done, especially when she found out where you were, then she should have claimed all the back spousal support that you owe, especially for the kids. It must add up to thousands. There isn't any back support owing, Madge. I started sending money to her from week 1, in fact since Mandy saw me in hospital the other week and gave me their account numbers I've been sending their money directly into their trust funds. Oh, I didn't know, she didn't say. Madge was getting quieter. And as for spousal support, I should be getting money from her. I grinned. No, that's not right at all, she exploded. You left her and the children for no good reason other than whatever shenanigans you were getting up to and then carrying on an adulterous relationship with that floozy behind her back. Except for the fact, Madge, that Mandy was the one who committed adultery first. What? Interposed Madge, who almost put her foot down and was close to colliding with the car in front. Yes, Mandy had the affair with Gosford Bloody Tanner, so I was left with little choice, either accept that Mandy didn't love me anymore and hadn't for a long time, or I move on with my own life. I moved on. But when did she have an affair? When? After you had spent every single opportunity you could to split us up ever since we became a couple. Eventually Mandy thought the grass was a whole lot greener elsewhere, so that's when she started sleeping with her boss. What? Gosford Bloody Tanner, her department boss. I caught them in bed together at a party. She told me it was the first time, but they looked like they were getting a lot more practice together than I ever got. I left them to it, packed my bags that night and left. I hoped I would never return. I know she did have some trouble with someone bothering her at work and put in a sexual harassment against him. Perhaps the grass wasn't so much greener with her boss than she thought then. Maybe Mandy wanted to spread her net wider? But she's never been out with anyone since you left. I babysit whenever she does and it is usually for functions at work or because she has to attend courses. She's never brought anyone home that I know of and the children have never said anything. Well, she certainly doesn't want me back other than nearby so that I can see the kids. She had made that clear over the years before that last straw broke the camel's back. But she's always loved you, Madge insisted, even when I dash. Yes, even when you were poisoning her mind against me, I know. Every time she came back from seeing you she used to snipe at me, especially about improving my job prospects. Everything I did wasn't good enough for her, or for you. I lived with it for a while, but once she started sleeping with her boss, that was the finish as far as I was concerned. While she certainly acts as though she still loves you, I can't understand why. I never could understand why. Whatever she felt about me at one time, it is definitely all over and done with now. Madge was quiet for the rest of the journey. That was a blessing. She dropped me off at the hospital and I was left to run through the various exercises again. This time it was a different woman who thought it was amusing to torture me. I thought the Maddie and Gaynor, the physios back in Lincolnshire, were bad enough, but Mel manipulated me like I was silly putty. After 2 hours with her, I was put through to a nurse who decided that I needed an X-ray. I suggested some oxygen would be good too. She just laughed. Nobody takes me seriously anymore. Once the X-ray photo was sent through to her office, she decided the single cast could come off and be replaced by a jointed one. She booked me in to have that done on Tuesday before my next physio session. Madge took me back home to Mandy's house. She was a hell of a lot quieter on the return leg than she was on the outer, which was a blessing. I was feeling like I had been pulled through a wringer backwards. Mandy wasn't much better than her mother communication-wise in the evening. I felt like I had been sent to Coventry. Josh filled the void, though. He had spoken with me as soon as he got in from school, mainly about firefighting, and showed me a book on the subject he had got out of the school library. It was quite old and didn't reflect what best practice was in the modern service, which I tried to explain, and this appeared to interest him. Josh disappeared to his room to play on his PlayStation straight after tea. The girls missed having Sally around and Mandy had a load of marking to do. I felt like a spare wheel again. Left to my own devices, I went to bed early. Madge picked me up next morning and was actually rather chatty, both at the house and in the car. I had told her the day before that I needed to go in an hour early because of my change of cast, and she came round just before the kids left for school. Mandy had left half an hour before the kids as she taught at a different, distant school to them, actually in the next county. When we got to the hospital, Madge insisted on coming in with me. I told her she could please herself. So she did and came behind me. The nurse cut off the cast using a small circular saw, unwrapped the bandages and cleaned up the leg. It smelled sweaty and the skin was very pale. Then she put on a walking cast that was articulated so that exercising the leg would be a lot easier. Once the cast had hardened, I went through to the physio again. This time Mel was gentler, or maybe I was just becoming more conditioned to the rough stuff. Madge took me down again on Wednesday and sat at the side of the gym again, while I went through my paces. "You are really putting in some effort on your rehab training," Madge commented on the drive back to Mandy's. "I've been very impressed. Sooner I get back on my feet, the sooner I can get back driving my car and I can be independent again and move back to where I belong and out of your lives again." Simple as that, Madge. "Oh," she said, "how long before then, do you think?" 2 weeks, hopefully, 3 tops. "Good luck, then." "Thanks." Mandy finished her school term on the Wednesday early afternoon and was already home by the time Madge dropped me off. Madge and Mandy had a conspiratorial chinwag in the kitchen while I enjoyed a lie down to recover from the torture for an hour or so. Then I got up to wash myself down and get myself changed in the downstairs cloakroom. I could just about fit in there on my own. Once I got changed, I got out my crutches and shouted through to the kitchen from the hall that I was going out for a walk and some fresh air. Mandy came out of the kitchen and decided to join me when she heard what I was doing. We talked a little as I swung my body around the roads in the estate roundabout. Nothing serious was discussed between us, although we touched on the conversation I'd had earlier with Madge, that I was working so hard to enable me to get out of Mandy's house as soon as possible. Mandy said she understood my reasons for that and hoped that I would try and keep in contact with my children. Josh was old enough to cope with my absence, she said, but the girls had been talking to their grandmother about how much they were enjoying having me around. When Mandy got around to what she wanted to say, eventually, was that she had found that she was happy for me that I had found Sally. She had decided that she liked her despite her original feelings and thought we were good together, even with the gap in our ages. Mandy said she didn't to pry but would like to know what I intended to do in the future. I told her that I was thinking of moving back to Portsmouth on a permanent basis, with a place of my own that had room for the kids to stay with me from time to time, and generally see more of them. Well, that was my plan. I would look to find something local if possible on the island or nearby on the mainland. Mandy nodded. I added that I hoped that Sally would be a part of those plans, but I hadn't discussed that with her yet. It was far too early for that. I wasn't sure if she would be prepared to move so far from her family. "I suppose you want a divorce, then," she said quietly. "It's the logical step, I guess," I said, "but I don't want to rock any boats here, like us having any unsettling arguments over who has the kids and when. I would prefer us to be on good terms as parents." "Of course, that is what I have wanted all along," Mandy replied. "You being out of contact for so long was horrible, and then finding you living so far away was another shock." "I had to get away," I said, "as far as I could get. I loved you so much before, that I knew if I stayed in the house I would stay, and in time I would hate you for what you did to us." "I loved you too," Mandy admitted. "I was lost for weeks when you disappeared. Your mom wouldn't tell any of us anything about where you were and how you were doing. She said she didn't know anything. She didn't. I didn't trust anyone. You know, I don't really get on well with my mother." "Oh. Well, the only way I knew you were even alive were the payments that kept coming into our joint account. The way the amounts varied showed it wasn't simply a standing order and that you were still thinking of us. The amount varied depending on how much work or overtime I got and how much I had left over after my expenses and a little bit of savings for emergencies like tires and servicing. I guess you can close that joint account now that I am paying direct into the kids' accounts." "I didn't realize you started doing that." "Yeah, once you gave me the account numbers I was able to set up the payments online. It was so easy using that old PDA the Maze gave me. I should have done that years ago. I was thinking that when I get back on my feet I'll go shopping with Josh and get myself a better model. He'd love doing that." "Yeah, I know." With Mandy, Josh and the girls all at home with school out for the summer holidays, we were able to have days out together. We went for walks, which was tiring for me, but it was also helping me to strengthen up again. Just getting the blood pumping again helped my ribs heal up so much faster. One advantage of being tired out at the end of the day, too, was that no matter how uncomfortable I was lying in bed, I went out like a light every night. On the Friday morning, Josh and I went to the local fire station. I had spoken to Watch Commander Squire earlier in the week and he was happy for me to come down, bringing Josh with me to have a look around. One of the firefighters cheerfully took Josh under his wing and showed him round and let him take part in some of the training they were doing. Josh seemed to be having a great time. Maybe he was a chip off the old block after all. Meanwhile, I had a chat with Alan, as W.C. Squires insisted I called him. I wanted to sound out the possibilities of transferring to his station and he grinned widely. Apparently he had spoken to Stafford after I had called him and between them they had worked out that I was most likely to want to transfer. I could do with a new crew commander once you were fit and well, grinned Alan, on Blue Watch. No, I said, I think Stafford may have confused you when you spoke. I was just a basic firefighter. We still call our crew managers leading firefighter up there, and I wasn't one of them. Well, you are now, said Alan, still laughing. Mervyn said you probably haven't got the letter through yet, but he recommended you for promotion and it came through on Tuesday. He sent me a copy. It'll be backdated pay-wise to the start of July. I'm gobsmacked, I said. I didn't think Stafford would do that. I never really had much to do with him. He sounded rather old school, I admit, laughed Alan. He thought you'd be surprised, but he wanted me to tell you that you fully deserve it and will make a fine station officer in time. I guess they haven't got used to the new role titles down at your old station. No, unofficially we still use the old ranks. We could never have got away calling Stafford Mervyn. I grinned back. We always called him sir, only my wife calls him Merv. We are a lot more relaxed here, Alan said. I suppose having a stable family life is always a plus when it comes to having a more responsible role in the service. Maybe that was what was holding you back before. So, you interested in both the transfer and the new role? Yes, absolutely, I enthused, deciding to say nothing at all about the state of my family life, wondering exactly how much Station Officer Stafford had told Alan. Okay, I can get that arranged pretty quickly. The next question is, when can you start light training? Well, I've been exercising in addition to my physiotherapy for about 3 weeks now. The hospital changed my full cast for this lighter one at the beginning of the week and hope to have this one off in 3 or 4 weeks at the outside, then I can really step up the gym work. Let me show you our gym, he said, getting up. You can come down day or night to use it, just sign on in the staff book at the entrance, so if we have a fire here, the crew manager on shift knows you are in there. I got up and he showed me the fully fit Ted gym. I guess that with these facilities the guys were pretty fit. I could see I had my work cut out to get back to full mobility and strength as soon as possible. I shook Alan's hand and said I would definitely make use of the gym and looked forward to getting back. Just keep me up to date, he said, and when I was ready I could return to light duties and start training with the guys. That Friday night Sally called quite tearfully to say that she couldn't come down Saturday as she had been unwell all week and couldn't travel. Nothing to worry about, she said, just a stomach bug. Chapter 5, Boyfriends. Mandy had a date that Friday night that Sally said she couldn't make it at the weekend. It meant that I had to babysit instead of Madge. That was a bolt out of the blue, especially after Madge had said that as far as she knew Mandy never dated. I don't think that woman had a clue what was going on. Mandy looked fantastic made up and wearing a classic black dress that I thought showed much too much of her shapely legs, and the plunging neckline made me a lot hotter under the collar than she must have felt. I couldn't sit down while I waited for her date to show. He was a teacher, of course, not Gosford Tanner, but he was tall and distinguished looking, with a smart suit on. He looked smarter than I ever did, and probably a lot more handsome, although I had nothing to judge his looks by. Mandy was still touching up her makeup when the doorbell went, so I answered the door in my crutches and we both regarded each other as if we were rivals. If we were stags we'd locked horns and gouged flesh from each other's flanks. As it was, we two macho men just regarded each other murderously. Crazy, I know, but I couldn't help myself and he responded in like fashion. The stakes went up a notch and a half when Mandy started walking down the stairs, in that dress and tall heels and looking so damned attractive. My morale sank like a stone as her face brightened up as they looked at one another and her new boyfriend whistled and said, "Wow." My lips formed the same exclamation but my throat was too strangled to vocalize the thought. I must have looked like a fish out of water gasping to breath. My mind running wild through the thoughts that she was still my wife, although I had no claims on her in that regard, nor did I want to particularly, as I had Sally as an unsullied embodiment of the female ideal, but I was still as jealous as any man could ever be. I knew that she had dressed up for him, that he would have a chance to hold her hand, perhaps dance with her, kiss her, go all the bloody way with her. I wasn't just yesterday's man, I belonged to the day before yesterday. Since me there was Gosford Tanner and God knew who else. I was so far back in Mandy's past that I was completely dead and buried. We were divorced in all bar name, we had only discussed the D word a couple of days earlier. The sooner I moved out the better, and the sooner I agreed with Sally what kind of relationship there was for us the better. Next weekend we would have to talk to one another about what we each wanted for the future and whether those intentions could be shared and fulfilled. I was in bed trying to pass the time by reading some unentertaining book by the time Mandy got home. It was after midnight. She must have seen my light on, so she knocked and popped her head around the door to see if I wanted a nightcap. I replied no, but she said she had already put the kettle on and was going to have a cup of tea herself, so I changed my mind. Okay, I'll bring it through to you if you like, she smiled. No, my back is aching lying here anyway, so I'll get up. Are you drinking yours in the living room or kitchen? She smiled again. Damn. She was smiling much too much to my mind. She had been miserable all week. She must have had a really good time tonight. I just hope her date didn't have as good a time as she appeared to have. I was going to take it upstairs with me. Don't let me stop you, I interjected. I can drink mine by myself, I just need to sit upright or even stand for a little while. No, that's all right, I can stay up a little longer. I don't feel tired and I don't have to be up too early in the morning, if the girls let me. She laughed again. As we moved through the doorway into the adjacent kitchen, I wanted to hear from you how Josh got on at the fire station. He was trying to tell me all about it as I was getting ready. You sound like you had a good time tonight, I observed. Yes, it was great. It's been a long time since I had a grown-up night out. Mark was really good company, we had a nice meal and the concert was absolutely fantastic. Anyway, did you talk to the station officer about transferring down here? Yes, I did, I said, as I attempted the awkward maneuver of sitting at the breakfast table and parking my crutch without it, or me, falling over, as Mandy bustled about brewing the tea and getting the mugs ready. And, she asked as I paused. Yes, the application is going through, I grinned. Actually, I heard I had been promoted to crew commander. Oh, she said, I thought Merv said you'd be crew manager? So Stafford tells you and not me about my business? I snorted. Well, you never speak to him, she said. He usually rings me once a week to find out how you are doing and I tell him. Blimey! I exclaimed, everybody knows everything about my business except me. I didn't find out anything until I got down the station. He told me not to tell you until you got the letter. I think he wanted to make sure it was a surprise. It was manned, it was. There was silence for a minute while she poured the milk into the cups and put the bottle back in the fridge. Sorry, Jimbo, she apologized. I thought it would be a nice surprise. I didn't expect you to be pissed. No, I'm sorry, too, I said. I shouldn't take it out on you. I think I'm just a little out of salts today. I expect you will miss Sally this weekend? Yes, I'm a little worried, I admitted. I wanted to give her my news too, and see how she'd feel about coming down here to live. We haven't really talked anything over yet. Mandy was quiet at that and swirled the teapot to 8 infusion and test poured a drop. It was still too pale, so she swirled the pot again and set it down to brew up a bit more. Perhaps we can go out somewhere tomorrow, as a family, while we still can? I asked. Ah, she said, that's the main reason why I wanted to speak to you tonight before going upstairs. She looked into my eyes. Yes? Yes, I wondered if you would look after the children tomorrow during the day and overnight. She bit her lip and looked at me. I think she went red just a little bit. Damn and bugger, I thought. Sure, I replied as calmly as I could, hoping the old reliable poker face was still working for me. Mark has got these tickets for a show in the West End. He teaches drama and wangled these red-hot tickets somehow from someone he knows. The show's had fantastic reviews, is booked up for months ahead, and these are the hottest tickets in town, she gushed. Mark wanted to make a day of it and go up about lunchtime. Great, I thought to myself, that's all my ego needs at the moment. me stuck at home on my own babysitting the kids and my ex getting her jollies off on a classy weekend away. That's fine, I said, trying to force my lips into a sham of a grin. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day started early for me. The girls were up at the crack of dawn as usual. Josh tended to lay in bed dozing until noon. It's exhausting being a teenager, I remember it well. Mandy slept in late, until about 9. I got the girls' breakfasts and then took a cup of tea up to Mandy. She got up after her tea and packed an overnight case. I didn't want to hang around and see her boyfriend pick her up again, so I persuaded the girls to go to the fun fair with me, my treat. We got a cab. Josh, of course, just groaned at the suggestion and went back to sleep. His loss. We had a great time, actually. The girls were a lot of fun. We were pretty comfortable being together again and they laughed at my antics trying to get on some of the rides and the negotiations I had with the operators on those rides that they let the girls on but wouldn't let me accompany them, or getting my crutches retained during the ride and returned afterwards. I was exhausted by the time we made it to the taxi rank and took the journey home. I phoned for a pizza delivery from the cab. At least I thought I would sleep well tonight and not lie awake thinking about Sally being absent and whatever Mandy was getting up to overnight with her boyfriend. Okay, I was jealous, sue me. The girls ran inside to get the kitchen table laid with plates and cutlery while I settled the fare with the cabbie. Josh met me at the front door. He looked grim. It's all right, I laughed at him, I've ordered enough pizza for all of us. It's not that, Dad, Sally's here, been here for hours and she's been crying her eyes out all the time. I couldn't get hold of you. You left your mobile behind on charge. What was the matter with Sally? Why was she even here? I rushed through to the house as quick as my crutches would carry me. I followed the sound of voices into the sitting room, where Sally was fussing over the girls while they showed her the cuddly toys we had acquired at the fun fair and they told her about the rides they had been on and the trouble I had getting around. I never won any of the cuddly toys, the games are designed for punters to lose, but I did buy a few for them. Sally and I exchanged glances. She looked pale, with red eyes, the smile that she had on her face while talking to the girls vanished. Okay, girls, I said, Kelly, please lay the kitchen table with plates and cutlery for 5-. Is it alright if I take mine up to my room, Dad? Interjected Josh, I want to watch a film that's say. Arts in 5 minutes. Sure, I said, just make sure you bring your plate down afterwards. Kelly, please lay 4 plates and K-tie, can you do the drinks? There's a big bottle of pop in the fridge. Okay, chorused the girls, and departed for the kitchen. Josh also made himself scarce, leaving Sally and me to it. Hi, honey, I said, holding out my arms to her. She didn't get up, just sat there crying her eyes out. I limped over to the settee. By now my leg was really hurting, while my left leg ached because it had carried the bulk of the load all day. I knew I'd overdone it by a long way today. I put my crutch to one side and sat next to Sally and put an arm around her. Hush, Sal, I whispered as she buried her head in my chest, in your own time, honey. I wasn't sure what had upset her and all sorts of theories were bounding around in my head, none of them pleasant, all of them, as it turned out, wrong. I'm pregnant, she sobbed. Well, that was one of the thoughts that had popped into my head. Clearly it wasn't mine, there hadn't been time for anything to show up on a test. Are you sure? I asked as calmly as I could. Yeah, I took a couple of those test kits that were positive and then saw my GP on Thursday morning. How far along are you? About 2 months, he thought. Does the father know? She pulled her head out of my chest at that point and looked at me, her pretty face wet with tears. I told him last night. The waterworks started up again. The front door rang. The pizza had arrived. Girls! I yelled, answer the door, will you? I'll be out in a moment to settle up the bill. I turned to Sally, wipe your eyes and come into the kitchen for some pizza. I couldn't eat anything, she sobbed. I need to go, get the last train back. Oh no, young lady, I insisted, that is the last thing you are going to do. You need to look after yourself properly. I squeezed her shoulder. No matter what happens, whatever decisions are going to be made, the important thing is that you keep calm and relaxed. You need to drink something, eat too, if you can, and sleep in here tonight. Tomorrow we can talk things through calmly and then you can catch the train tomorrow. All right? All right, she said, giving up the fight easily. I struggled to get up and grab my crutch. Sally helped me and squeezed my hand. Jeff's asked me to marry him, she said, and I said yes. I am so sorry, baby. I squeezed her hand back, spilt milk. Honey, we'll talk once the girls have gone to bed. I'll sort out the pizza guy, she said, picking up her bag from beside the settee. You go through to the kitchen and sit down. The girls and I can bring the boxes in. I had ordered 3 pizzas, knowing we'd all be hungry. With the girls still high as kites after their day out and Josh coming down 3 times 4 seconds, Sally cheered up a lot and nibbled a couple of slices. It was still taking me a long time to climb up the stairs, so Sally scooted up with the girls and helped them get bathed, teeth cleaned, and ready for bed. They were old enough to look after that themselves, but Mandy always did it for them every night and children don't like their routine interrupted too much. At least I was able to kiss them goodnight and tuck them in. Then I popped my head into Josh's room and chased him into the bathroom to get himself ready for bed. Sally put the kettle on for a cup of tea and we sat down to talk. Her tears had all dried up by now and we could discuss our situation calmly, on both sides. She had been going out with the father of her baby, tattooist Jeffrey Arnold, for about 8 months, breaking it off a week or so before she heard about my injury. Same reason, another man not prepared to commit. That was changed now that Sally was pregnant. Jeff was prepared to marry her and she had decided that she loved him after all. Not much I could say other than to wish them all the best in the future. I was dog-tired and retired to bed. Sunday morning I was up and about first. I had intended getting some meat out of the freezer the previous night to defrost, but I had forgotten to do that in all the drama. I rummaged around in the chest freezer in the garage and found a couple of small pork loin joints and put them in the microwave on defrost for what seemed like ages until they were reasonably soft. Then I popped them in the oven to roast until lunchtime. I also looked out some frozen cauliflower florets, carrots, and peas. It looked like it was going to be a hot day, so I thought we could have fruit and ice cream. I found some jelly cubes in the cupboard, too, so I made a jelly and mixed a tin of chopped peaches into it and put that in the fridge to set. The beeping of the microwave, or my rustling around the kitchen, must have disturbed Sally, so she roused herself and came into the kitchen, still yawning and didn't look as if she had slept too well. I poured her a coffee, which she took black for now, saying that milk was making her sick. Then she had to run for the downstairs loo again. She tried a bit of dry toast without butter when she returned and that stayed down. The girls got up about 9 and happily played families with their new cuddly toys in the garden after they had breakfasted. Josh, of course, slumbered on. I would probably have to wake him up just before lunch. Mandy called mid-morning. Sally was nearest and answered the phone and they talked for a few minutes before I was called from the kitchen, having just turned the parboiled potatoes into the roasting tin. "You all right?" asked Mandy as soon as I picked up the phone. "Yeah," I replied, "I guess so." I couldn't be sure whether she was referring to how I felt about Sally and the baby or Mandy and her new boyfriend, so I thought it best to be non-committal. "I am running late, so I won't be back in time to do lunch dash." "No problem," I interrupted, "I've got a roast underway, aiming to serve up about 1. "Oh, I was going to suggest we go out for a meal this evening. I can make up a meal for you to microwave later if you like." "No," she said, "I'll be back about 1. "Have the children been behaving themselves?" "They've all been lovely," I chuckled, "although I've hardly seen Josh all weekend." Mandy laughed. "That's par for the course." "How was your night?" I bit my tongue. "The show and the meal, I mean." I think I went red with embarrassment even though she was the other end of the line. "It was fantastic, we had a wonderful time. Anyway, Mark'll drop me off about 1. "Okay, I'll try and hold on for your arrival. Give us another call when you get close." "Okay, will do, love you." And then she hung up. What? Love me? What was all that about? She's been shacked up with her boyfriend for the last 24 hours and now she's doing her best to confuse me. I managed to talk Sally into staying for our meal. She asked me what was going on with Mandy. She had thought that Mandy was her main rival for my affections and now she was going out with some guy from work. I reminded her what I had said to her before. I lost Mandy years ago, long before I left, and there was no way back for us. She told me about Jeff. He ran a successful tattoo parlor in the middle of Grantham and lived in a two-bed flat above with a small yard out the back. They were about the same age and Sally was optimistic about their future. I told her I was delighted for her, although inside I had that sinking feeling about my own future, which was up in the air again. My leg was still pretty sore after yesterday's efforts, so I sat in the garden late morning before finishing off in the kitchen, while Sally played with the girls. They were going to miss her when she stopped coming down to see me. It would be nice if the girls could keep in contact with Sally, they'd love the baby when it came, but I wasn't sure how cool Jeff would be about me coming round bringing the girls up to see his wife and baby. I flicked through the local paper, looking especially at small furnished flats. There were a couple of promising ones that I thought I could afford to rent and would contact the letting agents about in the morning. Just like the Gosford Tanner affair, I needed to get away, although I would be much less dramatic than before. I didn't want to lose my family this time around. Sally called out that Mandy had arrived and I called the girls in and Josh down from upstairs to get the kitchen table finished off. I had already part-laid the table for the 6 of us. Mandy hadn't said anything about Mark, so I hadn't allowed for him to come in too. Fortunately, Mark just dropped her off. I opened the front door for her after shouting up for Josh, in time to see Mark put his arms round her and kiss her goodbye. It shouldn't have hurt, but damn it, it did. I mashed the small amount of mashed potato with added pepper and butter much harder than I intended. It was probably the smoothest mash I'd ever made. Actually, I thought Mandy looked very smart and attractive, naturally enhanced by her face wreathed in smiles. She'd had a better weekend than I had. Everyone was very complimentary about the meal, although it was no different to what we all took turns in doing down at the fire station. If anything, I would have used more fresh vegetables if it had been easier for me to get to the shops. After we cleared up, and the girls went out to play with their friends and Josh retired to his hermit's refuge, Sally expressed a desire to catch a train home and Mandy offered to drive her down. I decided to go too, to say goodbye to Sally for what I thought would probably be the final time. Josh was told he was in charge, so he could keep an eye on the girls, and Sally took her leave without elaborating, so the girls were not upset, thinking they would see her in a week or so. Both Mandy and I gave Sally a hug with tears all round and insisted we stay in touch. Then we waved her goodbye. Mandy and I were silent in the car on the drive back, getting home late afternoon. I was so tired and demoralized, with my leg still playing up, that I went straight to bed. I got up early again on Monday morning and after putting the coffee on and helping myself to a cup, I was out the door swinging on both crutches and heading towards town. I visited the 2 estate agents to arrange to look more closely at the 2 flats. I discarded the first, as too small and poorly accessed. The second was perfect, just 2 blocks from the fire station, so I put in an offer just below the rent asked for. I had enough for the rental deposit. I had switched my mobile off while I was with the estate agents, and remembered to switch it back on. There were messages from Mandy, which I ignored. I swung around to the fire station and had a coffee with the lads, which was very enjoyable. I mentioned the flat and several of the guys had bits and pieces they could let me have, like spare crockery, an old microwave and a kitchen set of table and a couple of rickety chairs. Then I got on my crutches and headed towards the hospital. My mobile went off. It was Mandy. I answered. She wondered where I was because she was due to take me for my physiotherapy appointment. I told her I was on foot and only 5 minutes away. Did I want picking up afterwards? Yes, that would be good, I replied, and would ring her when I was finished. I wasn't tired or too sore, just out of sorts. I went through the physio without too much enthusiasm. The nurse checked me over afterwards, said they would probably take off the cast in a week or 2 and I could return to work at least part-time for light duties, while still continuing the physiotherapy. I switched my mobile on again and found a message from the estate agent, so I called him back and found my reduced rent offer had been accepted and I could go in and sign a 6-month lease. The estate mentioned that me being a firefighter actually swung the reduction. That was a turn up for the book and cheered me up no end. I called Mandy and asked if she could pick me up from the fire station in an hour. She said she would. I signed the lease and popped in to see the lads to take up their offer of furniture. In the meantime, they had asked around and one of the guys knew someone who had a leather settee and chair they didn't want. The fire station was often being offered old furniture, which we burned for training purposes. Watch Commander Alan Squires said the Blue Watch lads could use the van to pick up the stuff and help me get it into the flat. I could pick up the keys on Friday, so we agreed to meet up then. Alan told me to take a full week off after my cast was removed and then come back on day shift for a couple of weeks to help with the paperwork in the office before working with my watch on light duties in training. Mandy pulled into the fire station car park and made her way over to the office. It was early afternoon, warm and sunny, and she was wearing a thin t-shirt and shorts and looked really hot. The lads of Blue Watch had their tongues hanging out while I introduced her to everyone. Naturally, Alan offered to show her around and off she went with him. The rest of the watch rounded on me asking what the hell was I doing moving into a one-bedroom flat when I had that at home. There was a lot of shaking of heads as I explained I was only at her place recovering from injury. We had been separated for over 5 years and she had a boyfriend, at which the general opinion was that I was a poor bugger. Tell me about it. On the journey home, Mandy mentioned that Alan had told her about the lads helping me move into my flat on Friday and when was I going to tell her? Mandy, we've only just got in the car, give me a chance. So when did you decide to move out? Well, this weekend was a bit of a clincher, I said, so I put in an offer for a short-term lease this morning and was accepted less than an hour ago. You are a bloody idiot, Jimbo. Not a lot I could add to that. It may have been hot out, but we didn't need the air conditioning on in that car for the rest of the journey. I wanted to ask her to give me a lift in the morning to the trading estate so I could order a washing machine but thought better of it. I might have to order something online. The kitchen in the flat already had a cooker, so I didn't need to worry about that. The news that I was moving out on Friday didn't go down well with the girls. They were in tears that I was leaving again and why couldn't I stay? I assured them that I was living very nearby and I should be mobile and driving again in 2 weeks and could still see a lot of them. They asked if they could stay with me sometimes and I had to explain that I could only afford a one-bedroom flat at the moment, but would try and get something bigger in the near future. Josh was very quiet until Mandy mentioned that she had picked me up from the fire station, then he got very upset. You went to the fire station and you didn't take me with you? Josh exploded, you gotta be the worst bloody dad in the world. And then he stomped off to his room. Chapter 6, New Start. I was not surprised to get the invitation to Sally and Jeff's wedding. Sally and I conversed by email all the time, so I knew roughly when it was coming up. I had even visited the couple 3 or 4 times in the past couple of months and found that Jeff and I got on like a house on fire. I was absolutely certain though, if I passed out on their settee I would wake up in the morning with one of his works of art on my bum. That was never gonna happen. Sally had tucked a note in with the invite saying she was having the girls as 2 of her 3 bridesmaids. She had a small family herself, an older brother with a 2-year-old, who was to be a page boy. Naturally, Josh and his mother were also invited to the wedding rehearsal the day before and the wedding. The letter continued, saying perhaps I could help out by bringing Josh up with me? Of course I could, but first it would mean talking to Mandy. With our relationship once more strained, we were at the point where either I collected the kids by staying in the car and honking the horn, or she dropped them off at my place, again without getting out of the car. I had a small house at Paulsgrove on the mainland, 15 minutes drive away, having busted a gut to scrape together enough for the deposit. It was an auction bid, the Victorian mid-terrace house having been wrecked by evicted students, all the windows and doors broken, wash basins, bath and toilets smashed, flooded out because all the taps had been left full on during the process of eviction. With the help of Blue Watch I turned it back from 4 flats into a 3-bed house again with a basement gym. The Watch didn't have to help, they could have lived a hellish existence with a total grouch for a boss if they wanted to, their choice entirely. During my rehabilitation, once I was able to drive and train to get my fitness and mobility back, I got involved in local intervention fire education, training junior firefighters. That kept me too busy to mope at first and then, surprisingly, I ended up really enjoying it. So I continued doing this during every spare moment I got, even when I returned to full active duty. I became an ambassador for the scheme and promoted it all round the country, including my old haunts in Lincolnshire and Humberside. That was why I returned to the area so often, calling in on Sally and also the Mays. Apparently Darren missed me and called me his best friend. Mind you, I later found out that anyone who gave Darren their undivided attention for a while was his best friend. I got on quite well with Annabelle and Gordon and looked forward to the spring when both the Mays and the Arnolds were expecting their happy events. So I left it a fortnight before calling Amanda, it being about 4 weeks to the wedding in mid-December. "Hello?" Mandy answered her mobile brightly. We had exchanged mobile numbers months before. I suppose it was useful in case we needed to contact each other quickly if we had an emergency with the kids. I say exchanged, I gave my new number to Josh and presumably he passed it on. "Hi, Amanda," I said, "it's Jim Dash." "I know, I have your number in my contacts." "Oh, right," I said. "I don't know why I have the bloody thing anyway, I only ever use it to speak to Josh since he got one for his birthday. Everyone else I keep in contact with by email. I wanted to speak to you about Sally and Jeff's wedding next month. Dash. You're cutting it very fine, Jimbo, I'd almost given up on you." "Oh. Back to Jimbo, now is it? And as for giving up on me, we'd both done that long ago." "Well, I'm happy to fit in with whatever plans you have, perhaps take Josh off your hands, etc. Perhaps you could come over one evening, have dinner with us? Now that we've got our dining room back." She laughed as she said it. I wasn't really in the mood to laugh with her. "Well, I'm on nights at the moment, so I just have a breakfast early afternoon and we have our main meal at the station about 2 in the morning. I really didn't want to eat with them and have Mark sneering across the table at me, or he was living with and making love to my wife, even if she was just that in name only. Perhaps you could pop in on your way home from school?" I suggested, knowing she didn't work in the city, but further along the coast to the east. Okay, can't tomorrow night, but the night after all right? About 5:30-ish? Yes, that's perfect. Good for me, too. See you then, take care, Jimbo. You too, Mand, bye. I never really got on with making cakes, the odd sponge pudding, which I could disguise with lashings of custard, but I do make a mean double chocolate chip muffin, which the kids, including Blue Watch, always love, so I made up a batch of them. Mandy ran from the car in the rain when she arrived. I had been keeping an eye out for her and met her halfway with the umbrella, that got me a nice smile for my pains. I took her coat and bag and hung them on the post at the foot of the stairs and led her through to the tiny kitchen, where I had already put the kettle on to boil. I finished off making the pot of tea while Mandy had a look around, going into the sitting room. She hadn't been inside since I got the place. I caught up with her, peering at the backyard the auctioneers described as a good-sized garden laid to lawn. It was no bigger than a postage stamp. "Nice little place you've got here," she commented with another of her easy smiles. It wasn't a nice place. It was a basic ex-council house in the middle of a crowded sink estate. My fences on 2 sides were brand new, erected by Blue Watch under my supervision as a training exercise, the other 2 were falling down. I had already decided I was going to bite the bullet and replace the other fences in the spring even though they were not my fences, for peace of mind. No garage, just a designated parking spot. In one of the 6 parking bays opposite the house was a burnt-out car, no doubt a stolen car probably taken by a near neighbor who wanted to get home after a night out somewhere and torched it to destroy any evidence. The fire service would not have been called to put it out as that would have defeated the object, so it would be left to burn down to the concrete. We were still waiting for the council to tow it away, knowing on average it takes them 6 weeks to do it, then there'd be another wrecker left there within a fortnight. Still, this house was all I could afford. Oh, are these your famous muffins?" she said, having pulled one apart and popped a morsel in her mouth. "Yeah. Great, I'm starving, been on my feet all day doing auditions for the various productions going on and missed my lunch. I've made a whole batch, you can help yourself to another if you like, and take the rest back with you." I picked at one with little enthusiasm. It always upset me seeing her, remembering that I had loved her since I was about 9, and she was now somebody else's. In fact, she hadn't been mine for a long while. "Thanks." Another smile and she grabbed a second muffin. I poured the tea. "Arrangements for the wedding?" I asked, as I handed her the cup and saucer, the arrangements for the wedding being her reason for being there and reminding me of what a disaster my life had been. The tea set of 5 cups and 6 saucers came from the change in my fortunes and for the economy to pick up again, or Christmas, perhaps. "Yes, arrangements," she said, accepting the tea with one hand and delicately brushing a few dark brown crumbs off her lips with the other. I can't come to the wedding rehearsal as we have a performance of the nativity play for the years 6 and 7 children Friday night, so I'll either come up during the night, if not too tired, or follow up in the morning. So? She paused. If you drive up with the children and my mother dash. What? I said, I'm not driving up with dash. Honey, she interjected, she can't drive all that way, you know she hates long journeys and she's not long after her operation, but she can share one hotel room with the girls and you can room with Josh. It'll be good for the family, it's time you and Mum buried the hatchet. Fireman's axe, I said, trying to force a grin so it sounded more like a joke than what I was really thinking. I'd like to bury it in her head. You don't mean that Jimbo dash. I do, I really do, she's poisonous, your mum. Well, I think you should put in some effort to be nice to her. She has been very complimentary about you recently. Oh, she harping on it, Mark, then, with me out of the picture? No, of course not. Anyway, Mark has been out of the picture for ages now. Why's that? I thought you were getting on like a house on fire. No, he was boring, so we stopped going out. Oh, I raised my eyebrows, a free agent now, then? No, I've been seeing John for a couple of months now. Great, so long as you're not lonely. I chewed out my words. No, she admitted, never lonely. You? Nobody special. Too busy for anything long-term, I said, got a lot on at the moment. Of course. We sat quietly sipping tea until it was all gone, or cold. I suppose we ought to get our situation sorted out, finalized. She looked up from her cup and I looked up from mine. I noticed she didn't say the D word, so I wasn't going to either. You know how I feel about it, I said. You get the ball rolling whenever you want, and I'll sign anything that is reasonable. That's all right, I'm not in any hurry. Me neither. So, about Mum? Yes, no problem. She's not as big a pain in the bum that she used to be, I have to say. I packed the muffins into a bag for her and saw her off with a wave. Madge wasn't going to be too much of a problem. She had mellowed over the past couple of months. She'd had to have a knee operation in October and, as it was a couple of weeks before half-term, I had to take her to the hospital and pick her up about 6 hours later, and, other than half-term week when Mandy took her, I had to take Madge to physiotherapy once a week, which we fitted around my shifts. No great hardship for me as I was on first names with everyone down there, so I was kept amused during the wait. But 20 minutes each way with Madge was different to 3.5 straight hours through the evening rush hour. I wasn't looking forward to it. Mandy's new boyfriend, John, was another matter, as well as the divorce now rearing its ugly head. Well, she had raised the subject, then quickly dismissed it as of no consequence. If that was the case, then why raise it in the first place? Of course I knew it was going to happen someday and there was absolutely no reason for us to stay married. I hadn't worn my wedding ring for over 5 years, although I noticed that Mandy wore both her wedding and engagement rings today. Perhaps she only wore them to school to ward off the predators? I drove up to Grantham the weekend before the wedding, for Jeff's stag do. A quiet affair, in his hometown of Hull, with half a dozen of his mates. We shared a hotel room. We drank a lot of beer and, yes, you've got it, I woke up in the morning with a sore bum. When I checked in the morning, I looked in the mirror. The bastard had written "Productive Hull," except no pseudostits in 2 lines on the right-hand cheek of my bum, the pissed bugger. Yes, he had left the O out of product, but, to be honest, at the time I hadn't noticed the misspelling of substitutes. It looked right in the mirror. It was another week or so before I catoned on. I've had it removed since, of course, by laser surgery, just a faint smudge remains. I picked up the kids first on Thursday afternoon, straight after school, and put them in the back. Josh kicked up a fuss at first, as he wanted to sit in the front rather than sit in the back with his silly sisters, as he put it, but Madge needed the legroom because of her knee. I let him sit in the front on the way around to Madge's house, on condition that he would be cheerful for his grandmother and not sulk. He promised, but I knew what he'd be like. He was a chip off the old block and I'd been sulking for years. Madge was all smiles, but then she had been for a few weeks now. She even went as far as to squeeze the back of my hand when I changed gear the first time. I nearly buggered up the gears. "Isn't this lovely?" she breezed, with a big grin on her face. "And how are my favorite grandchildren?" "We refine, Nan," chorused the girls in harmony. "We're your only grandkids," muttered the chip under his breath. I had to smile. It was just gone 4 when we left the island, with the drive estimated to take about 3.5 hours, plus at least 1/2 hour break for refreshments, fuel, and perhaps one more toilet stop. I thought we would get into the hotel by 8 or quarter past. Bit late for an evening meal for the kids, so I told Madge that we would play it by ear and stop for a toilet break first and meal break second. She seemed happy with that. As it turned out, by the time we got north of London, about halfway through the journey, the 3 kids declared they were hungry, so we stopped at one of the motorway services with multiple food serving areas. The kids naturally wanted fast food, while I wanted something a bit more adult-orientated. Madge concurred, so I put Josh in charge and gave him some cash and sent them into their preferred restaurant, and Madge and I went into another for something a little healthier, although as it was all open plan we could keep an eye on them from where we were sat. Being self-service, I fetched the food while Madge sorted out the table and collected the cutlery, etc. "So, have you heard that Mark is not in the picture anymore?" opened Madge, shortly after I sat down. "Yeah, Nan said she had swapped him in for a new guy." "New guy?" said Madge, startled. "I didn't know about any new guy." "Yeah, John the First think his name is. Been seeing him for a few weeks. Apparently Mark was too boring." "Sorry, I didn't know. Amanda doesn't know what she wants." "Well, she wants you back, but she's not going the right way about getting it. She doesn't want me back, she makes that plain every single time we meet." "And how often do you meet?" she asked, lifting an eyebrow. "As few and far times between as possible." I grinned. "And that's because?" "She breaks my heart every time I see her." We sat silently, picking at the remnants of our dinner, looking up at where the kids were, enveloped by our thoughts. Josh was playing on his handheld, but looked up when the girls waved at us and lifted his hand briefly with his crooked smile. "Josh is going to break hearts one day," Madge observed. "The likelihood is that his heart will be broken." "Why do you say that?" "Experience. I've only loved 2 women and they have both played me for a fool and left me high and dry." "You left Amanda. And you had this girlfriend Sally to fill the gap." "I only left Mandy after I caught her with her lover. And I spent most of the time with Sally fending her off because I couldn't commit until it was too late. I spoke to Amanda about that supposed affair. It looks like she was tricked or drugged." "Yeah, that's what she told me." "Well, I was there and she certainly wasn't putting up any kind of resistance. I don't know all the details, she never told me and still won't tell me, but I know she got somebody fired at work because of sexual harassment." "That must have been the guy." "I know she was very depressed about it, especially with you gone and her job and reputation in jeopardy. When I had a go at her about you and said she should get a court order to pay her an allowance, she told me in no uncertain manner that you were sending her more than enough money. At the time I thought it was just a salve of your conscience while you were living it up, but you weren't, were you?" "No. You were living hand to mouth, in cheap lodgings and doing 2 jobs most of the time to keep your family together, well, together without you." She was smiling at that. Well, I wasn't smiling much. My whole world had been in a collapsed state for years, and not just because I finally caught her in the act, but she had been sniping at me for a long while, wearing me down as if I wasn't good enough in this affair, or whatever it was the final straw, her finding the grass greener somewhere else. With me living with her, I was holding her back. Me leaving left the field open for her to find someone who could keep her in the manner she wanted. "Yes, but you were the one keeping her, you were sending all this money back, and now she tells me you have put thousands of pounds in the children's trust funds." "I put in what I can afford. I need a house now so I can have the kids with me on a regular basis, so I can't put in as much as I used to." "I know. And I think you have done really well." She squeezed my arm. "You could still win her back, you know." "Why would I want to?" "That's the attitude," she said. "You've been selling yourself short for far too long. Everybody's been selling me short, take you for example." "I know I did, and I want to apologize. I was blinkered and didn't look at you the same way Amanda did. You really don't know how attractive you are, James. All the physiotherapists when you drop me off drool over you and you're the only topic of conversation all the while you are sitting in the waiting room or walking around the grounds." "Yeah, but they are all married." "Does that make a difference?" "Of course it does. Then perhaps you are your father's son after all. I hope I am. I think you probably are, she laughed. I wasn't at all sure what she meant by that. She knew my father better than I did. I was very young when he left, and he never came back or contacted us again. I didn't even know if he was alive or dead. No use asking my mom, she hardly knew I existed, even when I visited her at the nursing home. I don't really remember him. Madge, you and Bob were friends with him. What was he like? You look a bit like him. He was a handsome man. You sound even more like him than you look. He was a proud and stubborn man. When he found out what was going on, he left. What was going on? Mum said he left with some floozy. No, Jimmy, he didn't leave because he had a lover dash. She looked at my face, which must have looked astonished. You mean? She nodded. Yes, your mother had the affair with my Robert. No! I exclaimed, a sick feeling in my stomach. When? From before you were born. I ran and almost made it to the toilets. I made a mess of the corridor outside the gents. Then I dry heaved over one of the bowls for a few moments, before Josh came looking for me. You all right, Dad? He asked when he found me. You should have had the fast food, the rest of us are okay. I peered up at him. He had a smug look on his face, which vanished when he saw the look on my face. Sorry, Dad, you look awful. Just give me a few moments. I managed to get out, go back out and look after the girls. I don't think there's anything left inside me, but I just want to make sure. Okay, Dad, he half turned. Nana wanted me to tell you, and she said this is important, that she is really sorry. What she said was wrong all these years and thinks you and Mom were meant for each other and there is no one, including Nana, who could possibly object to you being together. And something about passing some sort of test. Are you and Mom thinking of getting back together, 'cause we'd think that was cool? No, Josh, we are not getting together, your mom and I, besides she's got John now. Oh, okay, who's John? I dunno, I laughed, I just dunno. Your mom's driving me crazy. Okay, so long as you are alright. I'll see you outside in a minute. I washed up and when I got outside, Madge was waiting for me, her eyes reddened. She almost bowled me over and clamped her arms around my neck and kept kissing me. Big wet kisses, too. I'm so sorry, Jimmy, so sorry, she sobbed, that all came out so wrong. Amanda sent off a sample of your blood when she changed your bandages and the results came back to say you are not remotely related to her. I have held this against you for so long and I have been totally wrong. Okay, Margaret, let's sit down and get this straight. You thought I was Robert's son and that I was therefore Mandy's half-brother, which is why you objected to us courting, marrying, and staying together all these years? Yes, she sobbed, that's why I made Robert's life a misery these last 20-odd years until he finally left me 3 years ago. We got back into the restaurant, where the kids were waiting for us, concerned looks on the girls' faces, with Josh looking bored, as usual. Apparently the batteries were flat on his mobile and he had forgotten his charger. Chapter 7, Are you dancing? Sally, I asked tactlessly, are you sure you're not carrying twins? Which was repaid with a withering glare in my direction. I continued with a grin, but you do look good enough to eat on it. That brought back one of her famous brilliant smiles and she held out her arms for a welcome cuddle, so I guessed I hadn't upset her too much. Her tiny frame was actually looking enormous for 6 months gone, although it wasn't helped by her wearing an old smock to the wedding rehearsal that was maybe a fortnight too tight for her. Clearly she wanted to keep her actual wedding gown from being seen by the groom, as well as any other frock she intended to take on their honeymoon in London for the week following the nuptials. When you marry just before Christmas, money is tight and one of the partners is heavily pregnant, your holiday options were limited somewhat. Jimmy, thank you so much for coming, babes, she said in my ear as I tried to get as close to her as her bump would allow. The girls are gonna be the best bridesmaids a girl ever had. Well, you deserve the best, Sal. I hope this dry frosty weather continues for another day so the sun shines on your big day. Thanks, baby, she smiled like Madonna, looking up at me intently. So, Mandy coming up in the morning or later tonight? Morning, I think. I haven't spoken to her. She has a performance on at the school today and I expect she wants to spend the night with her boyfriend while the house is empty, before coming up in the morning. Boyfriend? Some guy called John, don't know much about him, I'm afraid. I didn't think, unless she's trying to make you jealous, of course. What would be the point of that? I said. You are such a dope, Jimmy, she chided, that's why I love you so much. That's why Mandy loves you so much, too. I guess you always feel something deep down for your first love, I said. I guess that's only natural, but calling that love is a bit strong, especially when she cannot bear to be in the same room as me. Well, Madge tells me different. Madge is living in a dream world. Mandy and I are done and dusted, and last time we spoke she even went out of her way to bring up the D word, so hopefully this nightmare will be over soon. Mandy brought up the subject of divorce and you were happy with it? It was a slam dunk on her part. I didn't see it coming, but she's had a couple of boyfriends lately. She is still young and actually quite okay looking, plus the house is virtually all hers. You've given her the house? I needed cash up front to buy my place at an auction, so Mandy completely maxed out her credit and took out a second mortgage to buy out 3/4 of my share, which means I have to chip in with a payment to her each month equal to 1/8 of the repayments. So you don't have a mortgage on your new place? Nope, own the place outright. Bought it for a song too. It's not much to be honest, and it is in a rough neighborhood, but it's now pretty secure and I've got room to have the kids stay with me. That is nice, she said, so, when we come down to Southsea Fair next year, you'll put up Jeff, me and the baby? Huh? Sure, Sal, I laughed, anytime, just warn Jeff to sleep with one eye open. Oh. You're bum, she screamed, come on, I want to see my husband's handiwork, show us. No. I protested, not here in front of everybody, besides he's not your husband yet. Spoilsport, you're no fun anymore. I think I've provided more than enough fun for your hubby and his mates at my expense. I was really annoyed at Jeff. You shouldn't have had so much to drink, then, you've only got yourself to blame. Well, half the bloody shots I drank were intended for your intended, I was protecting him like you asked, don't let him drink too much you said, and then he was left sober enough to do this to me. I didn't think he had his tools on him up in Hall. He didn't, Sally giggled, he got his mate Mikey to open up his shop, even then Jeff was too drunk and Mikey did the tattoo with Jeff telling him what to put. Bastards! I exclaimed, and I quite liked that Mikey. I'll get them both one of these days. Well, not today or tomorrow, after that it's open season, okay? Anyway, it didn't do you any lasting harm. No, but I couldn't donate blood this month, that's the first time in 4.5 years that I had to decline. Not even sure when they will allow me to donate again. Poor lamb, she clucked, you'll get over it. Like I get over everything else. Oh, baby, I've got regrets too, I still love you loads, so does Mandy, I think even Madge has got her eye on you herself if you don't get snapped up soon. Madge has certainly been strange lately, she's been really nice to me for a couple of days, now. Not sure what her game is. It's unsettling, I like to know where I stand. Mandy did turn up that night. I saw her bleary-eyed, hair all over the place, at breakfast, having driven up sometime during the night. She joined us in the breakfast dining room just as we were finishing ours. We barely exchanged a greeting before I departed with Josh. I had managed to get Josh up early with the promise of something more interesting than just being involved in the wedding all day. The girls were excited about the whole day, though, and were high as kites. I left Madge in charge, she was taking them all off to the hairdressers. Apparently one of Sally's friends ran a local salon and had closed up for the day, and all the female guests were booked in to have their hair, nails, and makeup done. Josh and I were off to the local fire station for him to have a guided tour round while I chatted to the station officer about whether he could get together enough volunteers to go round schools and giving youngsters firefighting training in the area. I had a laptop running a presentation program to show the big wigs. While all the girls were busy preparing from early in the morning, all the lads involved were probably sleeping late and meeting up at noon for a light lunch before getting changed to be at the church by 2 in the afternoon. It was fun, it gave a good chance for Josh and me to do more bonding without always being surrounded by females. I was surprised how enthusiastic and knowledgeable he was, talking to the guys about firefighting. I had visions of seeing him join one of my future watches and finding myself completely happy with that. For the wedding itself, Josh looked great all dressed up in a fitted suit, while I wasn't at my most comfortable in my off-the-peg two-piece which didn't quite fit me, so I left the jacket and tie off as soon as we got to the church hall where the reception took place. So, you dancing, said Mandy, after tapping me on the shoulder after I had danced with Madge for the second time. Yeah, sure, I said and noticed that Madge gave way gracefully with a big grin on her face. There was a lull in the music for a moment as we stood there facing each other awkwardly before I took Mandy's arm and led her towards the center of the small dance floor. So how many dances you had so far? She asked as we walked. Most of them, I think, I replied, trying to think what she was getting at. You? I continued as we stopped in the middle. Oh, a couple, with Jeff and his father, a charming man, and with Kelly and Katie, of course. And Madge somehow got Josh to ask me for a dance, she smiled. It was fun. Yeah, it was great dancing with the girls, I laughed. You did a great job with all three of them. Yes, I saw you dancing with the girls, you all looked like you were having fun. The music started and it was a slow one. Why are they always slow ones when that is the last type of dance you want? We moved closer together and she rested her head on my shoulder as we virtually stood there drilling for oil, moving round on the same spot in circles. Why aren't we together, Jimbo? We are still married, sharing our children between us, yet we are living different lives, spinning around just like this dance, so close and yet so distant. You can't do this to me, man, it is all too painful. You need to get back to John or Mark or whoever his name is, or Gosford bloody Tanner for all I care, and get our divorce sorted out so we can get on with the rest of our lives. There's no John or Mark, Jimbo, the only bloody man in my life is you, and you're not even in my life most of the bloody time. So who's this John you mentioned last month? The girls have told me you got your own room at the hotel. You are not with Madge and the girls. Are you with him? No, I am not with anyone, I have a room on my own. John was a trick on my part to stir you into action. He's our gardener, he lives at the back of us and does a couple of hours a week keeping it tidy. He's 70 and his wife Alice is very nice. Did you ask Madge about my sleeping arrangements tonight then? She lifted her head and looked at me coyly. No, none of my business, is it? What you do is up to you and who you do it with is not my affair, it's yours, so long as it doesn't affect our kids. Otherwise, I am not interested. The only man I am remotely interested in is you, Jimbo. Are you playing with my head, Amanda? Please stop whatever games you're playing, because you're torturing me. I removed my arms from around her and started moving away. She grabbed me by the arm. I couldn't shake her free as we left the dance floor. It was dark there, the noise from the disco even louder than on the dance floor. Mandy was still being dragged along, holding onto my arm grimly. I headed for the fire exit, pushed down the release bar, and we burst out into the frosty night air. I turned and faced her, my wife Mandy, who I had loved since we were about 3 years old. Her eyes were big and round in the moonlight, wet with tears. My heart went out to her, but I couldn't touch her, daren't touch her. Amanda, I said quietly, trying to keep the emotion I was feeling down, hopefully undetectable, my voice unavoidably choking on her name. Please just leave me alone, get the divorce sorted out, and I never want to see you again. And why is that? Her chin thrusting out. Because. I was searching for the right phrase, but all I could come up with was, a whispered, "You're killing me, man." Is that because you also think we should be back together, or do you think that we were a mistake from the beginning? Not a mistake, I loved you then and thought I'd love you forever. Just forever or forever and a day? The last one. Does that mean you still me? Mond, please don't do this to me. What do you think this is doing for me, Jimbo? To us? I don't know, I only know how I feel. I was always just pulled along for the ride. I've never really known how you feel. Jimbo, I have loved you all my life. I have always loved you and I will always love you. You are my life. Then why dash? Why is because I was a stupid little girl who never grew up, who had everything she ever wished for, a loving husband, beautiful children, a family home of our own. I had it all, she sobbed and the tears came in a flood. I had it all, the fairy tale, and I threw it away. I couldn't help myself, I pulled her to me and she buried her head in my chest. Mandy was asleep in my chest, she was deep in her dreams. She oozed contentment. I could feel the smile against my breast. I was wide awake, I could not sleep. I wasn't sure if I would ever sleep soundly again. Mandy was right, of course, no matter how much I denied it, the fact was that I loved her, always had and always would. Loved her with all my heart. Our lovemaking had been frenetic and I had brought my darling wife and lover to an ecstasy so powerful that she quite fainted away in slumbers still. I managed this feat with the power of lip and tongue, fingers and thumb. All the way through, though, I was as limp as yesterday's Caesar salad. I couldn't get it up to save my life, to save our lives together. Soon she will awake, remember how sated she was, before generously, insistently, embark on her pleasurable reciprocation. But by then I'll be gone, back to my room, back to my son, our son Josh. What will happen in the morning? She will wonder why I have gone and assume that, like me, we thought of Josh, still a child, sleeping alone in a strange bedroom. Mandy will smile and care for me more rather than less. I couldn't care more for her if I tried. She was my childhood sweetheart, I always have loved her and always will. She is my soulmate. Can we ever live together again? Can we ever make love again, with my manhood intact? Can we? I want to, but can we? I do not know and cannot understand how I can confront my fears for our future. I just don't know. It's all Gosford Bloody Tanner's fault. The end.